You find out your best friend is cheating. Not just a rumor, not a misunderstanding. You've seen the messages or even witnessed it. Now you're caught between two values, loyalty and truth. On one side, you want to protect your friend. On the other, you feel responsible for the harm being done to someone else. This conflict is not abstract. It involves real people, real relationships, and real consequences. Loyalty is personal. You've built trust with your friend over years, maybe since childhood. You've seen them through breakups, jobs, family drama. That bond isn't easy to dismiss. Loyalty means standing by someone even when they mess up. But that's where the tension begins. Does loyalty mean silence? Or does it mean helping them face the damage they're causing? Truth is impersonal but powerful. The partner, someone who may also be your friend, or at least someone you respect, is being lied to. Every day, they make choices based on a false belief. They trust someone who's betraying that trust. By staying silent, you let that continue. You become part of the lie even if you didn't start it. Telling the truth, though, isn't simple. It could wreck a relationship, and your own friendships might collapse as a result. Imagine this scenario. Your best friend, Alex, has been dating Sam for 2 years. You've known both of them through the relationship. Sam invites you over for dinner, asks for advice, supports you. Over time, you grow close. Then one day, you see Alex with someone else, clearly more than friends. At first, you want to believe it's a misunderstanding. But then you see the texts, the pattern, the clear signs of cheating. You talk to Alex. They admit it. They say it meant nothing, that they plan to end it. But weeks pass. Nothing changes. Now, each time you see Sam, a weight grows heavier. You laugh at their jokes, thank them for the meal, and walk out feeling like a coward. You didn't lie with your words, but your silence feels dishonest. The first step in this situation isn't to rush to expose anyone. You need clarity. Why is Alex doing this? Are they unhappy? Are they avoiding something? You sit down and ask them, why are you doing this to Sam? If they deflect, get defensive, or laugh it off, it tells you something about their state of mind. But if they admit guilt and show remorse, there's room for action. You push. You need to tell them. They deserve to know. Here's where loyalty shows its true form. Not blind support, but accountability. You give them a deadline. If you don't tell Sam by the end of the week, I will. You're not threatening. You're drawing a line. It's not about revenge. It's about stopping harm. Every day the lie continues, it grows. Sam might make long-term plans, marriage, a house, on a false foundation. You don't want to be the reason they build on sand. Suppose Alex refuses. They say they're scared. They say Sam will never forgive them. They beg you to stay quiet. You feel the pressure. If you speak, you lose Alex. If you don't, you betray Sam. But here's the truth. Alex already betrayed Sam. The damage is done. The only question is whether the lie keeps going or ends now. Some people argue that it's none of your business, that relationships are private, that you're not responsible. But staying neutral is a choice too. It means accepting the betrayal. It means valuing comfort over integrity. Others say you should always be loyal to your friend, no matter what. But that only works when your friend's actions don't hurt innocent people. Let's take another example. Imagine Sam finds out months later. They learn you knew. They ask you directly, "Did you know Alex was cheating?" You have to answer. If you say yes, they'll ask why you didn't say anything. If you lie, you compromise your own honesty. The fallout won't be limited to one relationship. Trust erodes in all directions. The emotional cost is real. You may lose Alex as a friend. They might call you a traitor. They might accuse you of interfering. But if friendship means enabling harm, it's not worth protecting. Being a real friend means pushing people to be better, not covering up their worst behavior. In some cases, your own safety or emotional well-being may be at risk. If the friend is manipulative, aggressive, or unstable, direct confrontation might not be safe. In those situations, you may need to distance yourself or seek help from a mediator. But if your relationship is strong enough for honest talk, you owe it to both parties to act. Let's say you finally tell Sam. You don't do it with drama. You sit them down and speak calmly. "I need to tell you something. It's hard. and it's not what I wanted. But I believe you deserve the truth. You explain what you know. You stay with them as they process it. You answer questions, but you don't speculate. You only say what you've seen, what you've confirmed. You don't frame Alex as a monster. You present the truth as plainly as you can. What happens next isn't in your control. Maybe Sam confronts Alex. Maybe they break up. Maybe they work it out. But you've done your part. You didn't betray anyone, you held the line. You protected the principle that love and trust must be earned, not faked. You also learned something about your own values. You learn that truth, while painful, creates room for healing. Loyalty, when grounded in honesty, becomes strength, not silence. Relationships built on lies don't last. Friendships that demand secrecy over integrity aren't real. At the end of the day, your job isn't to pick sides. It's to stand for what's right, even when it costs you. You walk away knowing you didn't enable betrayal. You may have lost a friend, but you didn't lose your own self-respect. And that's a loss you couldn't afford. You took something small from a friend without asking. Maybe a pen, charger, or notebook. You meant to return it quickly, or maybe you didn't think it was a big deal at the time. But now your friend thinks they lost it. You hear them say, "I swear I left it right here." Or they ask around, thinking it's gone for good. You feel that tightness in your chest. You know the truth, and now you have a choice. Say nothing and hope it blows over, or admit what you did. At first, it's tempting to stay silent. It seems harmless. You didn't break it. You didn't mean to steal. You might tell yourself it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe you even convince yourself you'll return it later without saying anything, and they'll never know. That way, no one gets hurt. But the longer you wait, the more the lie grows. Trust is built on the small things. When someone misplaces something, they start doubting themselves. If you borrowed their phone charger without telling them and they can't find it, they might retrace their steps, check their bag 5 times, blame someone else, or even buy a new one. They go through that stress while you stay quiet. That's the hidden cost of keeping the secret. Let's take a basic scenario. You're at your friend's house. You need to charge your phone. You see their charger on the table. You plug it in, planning to return it the next time you see them. But you forget. A few days pass. Now they're annoyed, maybe even a little panicked. "I just had it here last week. Someone must have taken it." That's when it hits you, they're not just missing a thing. They're losing peace of mind. And you're the reason. When you confess, you're not just owning up to the act, you're restoring trust. You're telling your friend, "Your stuff matters to me. Your peace of mind matters." The confession doesn't have to be dramatic. You keep it simple. "Hey, I used your charger last week and forgot to mention it. I'm sorry. I should have asked." That honesty may surprise them, but more often than not, it earns respect. Some people worry about the fallout. What if your friend gets mad? What if they overreact? It's possible, but the anger usually fades faster than the hurt caused by secrecy. When people find out you hid something, they don't just feel wronged, they feel lied to. Even a small lie makes them question what else you might be hiding. That's where friendships crack. Think of how you'd feel if the roles were reversed. Imagine you lost something important to you. Your favorite pen, a gift, or just something you use daily. You search everywhere, only to find out a week later your friend had it all along and never told you. Wouldn't you feel frustrated? Not because of the item itself, but because of the silence. You'd wonder why they didn't just say something. You'd wonder if they thought so little of you that honesty didn't seem worth the trouble. By speaking up, you do more than admit a mistake. You practice accountability. You show that you're someone who takes responsibility, even when it's uncomfortable. That kind of character builds strong relationships. It makes others feel safe around you. They know you're not perfect, but they know you're honest, and that counts for more. Let's take a different version of the scenario. Suppose the item isn't even that useful to you anymore. You forgot you even had it. But every time you see your friend stressing over the missing item, it eats at you. You start avoiding the topic. You change the subject when they bring it up. The silence becomes a wall. What started as a small thing now has emotional weight. It's no longer about the object. It's about trust. Some people think small things don't need confessions. They say, "It's not worth making a big deal out of nothing." But in close relationships, the size of the action doesn't matter as much as the honesty behind it. Even something as minor as borrowing a book or a tool without asking deserves an explanation. You're not just fixing a situation, you're showing that your friend's trust means more than your comfort. If the friend forgives you quickly, it's not because the mistake was small. It's because you respected them enough to tell the truth. That act clears the air. They stop wondering. They stop blaming themselves. They get closure. And most important, they know you're someone they can count on. Not just when things are easy, but when they're awkward. You might think this is all too serious for something minor, but trust doesn't collapse in big moments. It erodes slowly, in little lies and silent betrayals. When you admit the truth early, you stop that erosion. You set a standard. You show your values through action. Sometimes the confession leads to a deeper conversation. Your friend might say, "I've done the same thing before," or they might talk about how often things go missing and how it stresses them out. That opens up understanding. It makes the friendship stronger, not weaker. There are also long-term effects. If you make a habit of honesty, people trust you more. Not just with their things, but with their thoughts and feelings. They know you'll own up to your actions. They know you won't hide when things go wrong. That's the kind of friend people hold on to. The moment of confession may feel awkward. You may feel embarrassed, but that discomfort is temporary. The damage of silence lasts longer, and the act of telling the truth clears more than just the air. It clears your conscience. You're not defined by a small mistake. You're defined by how you handle it. A simple sentence, "I took this without asking, and I'm sorry," can mean the difference between shallow friendship and deep trust. And deep trust is built one honest moment at a time. You find a wallet on the ground. It's thick with cash, maybe more money than you've held at once. You open it. No credit cards, no driver's license, no name, no address. Just bills, maybe a receipt or two, and nothing else. You look around. No one seems to have dropped it. It's just there, silent and full of temptation. Your first instinct might be practical. There's no ID, so who would you return it to? You might think, if no one can claim it, then why not keep it? That logic feels solid in the moment. But pause. The real question isn't what you can do. It's what you should do. That wallet belonged to someone. Maybe a worker who just cashed their paycheck. Maybe an elderly person who doesn't trust banks. Maybe someone struggling who carried cash because they had no other option. The person is real. You may not see them, but they're out there right now, retracing their steps, hoping to find what they lost. You don't know their story, but you do know yours. What you decide next becomes part of it. You could pocket the money and walk away. You could tell yourself, if I don't take it, someone else will. That's one way to justify it. But now you've let someone else's potential dishonesty shape your values. You've made their imagined failure an excuse for your real action. The right move is to turn it in, not because it's easy, not because someone will pat you on the back, but because it's right. And doing what's right when no one's watching, that defines your character more than anything else. Let's say you're in a grocery store parking lot. You find the wallet between two cars. There's no one around. You could put it in your pocket and leave, or you could walk back inside and hand it to the manager. I found this in the lot. No ID, but it has cash inside. You don't know what the store will do with it, but at least you moved it toward a place where the owner might check. Now imagine this, 2 hours later, the person who lost it comes back. They're panicked. They ask the manager if anything turned up. The manager hands over the wallet, cash untouched. Relief floods their face. Maybe that money was rent. Maybe it was medical bills. You never see that moment, but you made it possible. You chose to be the person who gave a stranger a second chance. Some argue that if there's no ID, it's just free money. That turning it in won't matter because the wallet can't be traced. But doing the right thing doesn't depend on the odds of success. It depends on intent. If you knew there was even a small chance the owner could recover it, then turning it in remains the better option. Think about the alternative. You keep the money, you spend it. For a moment, it feels like a win, a lucky break, but something stays with you. You remember how you found it, how you hesitated, how you chose yourself over someone else in need. That feeling doesn't fade. Each time you see someone searching the ground or talking to a clerk, that moment might echo in your mind. Was that their wallet? You might also ask, what if I really need the money? That's fair. Life isn't always easy, but the need doesn't erase the fact that the money isn't yours. Even if your bills are late or you're behind on rent, the person who lost that wallet might be in the same situation or worse. Choosing honesty when you're struggling means more. It means you didn't let hardship make you hard. It means you stayed true even when you had every reason not to. Let's shift the example slightly. Say you find the wallet on a bench at a park. Still no ID, but this time there's a business card wedged in a side pocket. Not a personal one, just a local mechanic's card. Still, it's a lead. You call. You say, "Did anyone from your shop report losing a wallet?" Maybe they say yes. Maybe they say no. But you've tried. You've shown that even when the trail is faint, it's worth following. What if you turn it in to the police? Some people hesitate to do that. They think it's too much trouble or they don't trust the system. But turning it in creates a formal record. If the owner calls or walks into the station, they can get it back. If no one claims it after a set time, often 30 or 60 days, it might be returned to you. At that point, you've done everything possible. If you keep the money, then it's not theft. It's a recovery process that honored the original owner's chance. The act of returning something lost also affects how others see you. If someone's watching, maybe a kid nearby or a friend, you're showing them what integrity looks like. You're saying, "We don't take what isn't ours, even if we could get away with it." That's not just teaching, that's leading. This kind of decision shapes more than just one day, sets a tone. The next time you're faced with a gray area, a found phone, an unclaimed package, a mistaken refund, you remember what you did before. You build your own standard piece by piece, and each right choice makes the next one easier. You don't need to be a hero. You just need to act with decency. Keeping found money might feel like a gain, but it costs you clarity, clouds your conscience. Returning it costs nothing except a bit of effort, and it clears the path forward clean and honest. Even if no one thanks you, even if no one finds out, you'll know. You'll know that when faced with the easy way out, you took the harder but better road. And sometimes that's worth more than anything in the wallet. You're staring at the screen. The deadline is creeping closer, and the assignment is far from done. You're tired. Maybe you had other work, personal problems, or just lost track of time. Whatever the reason, you're behind. Then the thought comes, you could copy something. A few paragraphs here, a summary there, maybe even an entire paper. It would be easy. No one would know, probably. And just like that, you're standing at a line. Plagiarism isn't just a school policy. It's a test of your integrity. The rules are clear. Do your own work. But when you're stressed and out of time, those rules start to feel distant. Your mind looks for excuses. Everyone does it sometimes. It's just this once. I'll write my own next time. But each of those thoughts is a trap. They're not reasons, they're just shortcuts to avoid discomfort. Let's say you find a paper online. It matches the topic. It's written well. All you'd need to do is copy and paste, maybe change a few words. The temptation builds. You think, this could save me hours. That part is true. But what does it cost? First, it costs honesty. You're claiming something you didn't create. That may seem minor, but it plants a seed. The next time you're in a bind, you remember how easy it was to cheat. And slowly, cutting corners becomes normal. Second, it puts your future at risk. Schools take plagiarism seriously. If you're caught, you could get a failing grade. You could be reported. In some cases, you could be suspended or expelled. And that stays with you. It's not just a grade. It's a mark on your record, your credibility, and your confidence. Even if you get away with it once, the fear of being caught never fully leaves. Every time a professor mentions plagiarism, your stomach tightens. Every time you get a grade, you wonder if they noticed. Now consider the other path. You do the work yourself, even if it's rushed or rough. You stay up late. You submit something incomplete. Maybe the grade isn't great. Maybe it hurts your GPA, but it's your work. You earned it, flaws and all. And in the long run, that teaches you something more important than the content of the paper. Teaches resilience. Teaches ownership. Doing honest work builds a skill that no copied assignment can give you: self-trust. When you know you've created something from nothing on your own under pressure, you grow. You become more capable. You learn how to manage deadlines, how to push through fatigue, how to organize thoughts under stress. Those lessons stay with you longer than the assignment ever will. Imagine this: you're in class a few weeks later. The teacher returns the papers. Yours has a C. Someone else got an A, but you know they cheated. For a second, you feel cheated yourself. But then the teacher says, "We're building on this in the next paper." Suddenly, that copied work gives them nothing to build on. They don't understand the material. They're stuck. You, on the other hand, know what you wrote. You know where you struggled. You know how to improve. That C becomes a foundation. The fake A becomes a dead end. There's another cost people don't often consider: confidence. Cheating robs you of the chance to believe in your own growth. Even if you turn in something you're not proud of, you can learn from it. You can ask for feedback. You can get better. But when you cheat, there's nothing to improve. You don't know if you're capable because you never tried. Over time, that creates a quiet doubt. You start to wonder if you could ever do it on your own. That kind of doubt is hard to shake. Think about what led you here. Maybe it was poor time management. Maybe you underestimated the work. Maybe something personal threw you off. Those are problems you can fix. Plagiarism doesn't fix them, it covers them up. Like sweeping dirt under a rug, the problem stays and it grows. Facing the challenge, even if you fail, gives you control. Puts you in charge of your learning, your pace, and your outcome. You also have options. If you're behind, you can email the teacher. Be honest. Say, "I'm struggling with this assignment. Can I have an extension? Or at least partial credit if I submit late?" Many teachers respect honesty. They'd rather you admit a problem than fake your way through it. Even if they say no, at least you stood up and took responsibility. That counts. Some students say, "It's just one paper," but every action builds a pattern. You cheat once, it becomes easier to cheat again. And soon, you're not just risking a grade, you're changing how you see yourself. The kind of student who cheats once often becomes the kind who cheats often. Not because they're bad, but because they stop trusting their ability to succeed honestly. Let's shift the view. Suppose you get the bad grade. You take the hit. It stings. But now you've got data. You know what went wrong. You know what to fix. You know how to plan better next time. That's growth. That's how people move forward. The pain of a poor grade fades. The shame of plagiarism lingers longer. People sometimes cheat because they think school is just a hoop to jump through. But education is more than that. It's practice. It's a chance to think, to write, to struggle, and to build skill. If you skip that, you're not just avoiding work, you're avoiding the chance to improve. There's nothing noble about perfection. There's something deeply valuable about effort. You might not ace every paper, but you'll know you earned every mark you get. And over time, that builds something far stronger than a high GPA. It builds integrity. It builds trust in yourself. When you're tempted to copy, remember this: the person who cheats wins a moment. The person who tries wins a future. You find out someone in your family has a secret child. It's not a rumor. You've seen the evidence, photos, messages, maybe even heard it directly from the person involved. The child exists. The rest of the family doesn't know. Now you're holding something heavy, and you have to decide whether to keep it quiet or tell others. This isn't just gossip. It's not about drama. It's about the life of a child and the reality of a hidden relationship. The question is simple on the surface: do you tell? But it gets complicated fast. Telling the truth might hurt people. Staying silent might protect them, or it might delay a pain that's coming anyway. Start with what you know. Who is the family member, and what role do they play in your life? Is it a sibling, parent, an uncle or cousin? What's the nature of their secrecy? Did they abandon responsibility? Are they hiding the child out of shame or fear? Or are they trying to protect the child from something? Suppose it's your uncle. You discover he fathered a child during a past relationship. The child is now 8 years old. The mother is raising them alone. Your uncle visits sometimes, gives money, but tells no one in the family. He lives a normal life with his wife and kids, and no one suspects a thing. You found out by accident. Maybe a message popped up or someone mentioned it in passing. Now you can't unlearn it. You ask him directly, "Is it true?" He confirms it but begs you not to say anything. He says, "It's in the past." He says, "No one needs to know. It would destroy my marriage. It would hurt my kids. It would upset everyone." You listen, but you also think about the child. They didn't choose to be hidden. They didn't choose to live in the shadows of family silence. They might not even know who their father really is. One day, they might want to know their extended family. They might already be asking, "Why don't I know them?" And when that truth surfaces, and it usually does, it won't just hurt. It will explode. Keeping the secret might feel like protection, but it also means lying by omission. Every family gathering, every conversation, you'll be acting, pretending. That strain builds, and the longer the secret lives, the worse the fallout when it breaks. Because it always breaks. Someone slips, a document appears, the child speaks up. So you weigh your options. One approach is to confront the person responsible. You give them a deadline. You need to tell the family or I will. This shifts the responsibility back to them. They created the secret. They should own the truth. If they refuse, you have to decide whether their silence deserves your silence. But you don't rush to expose them. You think through the damage. Who will be affected? A spouse, children, parents? How will they take it? Can they process this without it tearing everything apart? Is there a way to guide the conversation with care? Say you decide to tell. You don't call a family meeting and drop a bomb. You speak to one person first, someone trusted. Maybe a parent, maybe a sibling. You say, "I've learned something serious. It's not gossip. It's confirmed. I need to talk through what to do." That first step helps you test the ground. You're not acting alone. You're opening a door to discussion. You're not starting a fire. You're checking the air for smoke. But maybe you decide not to say anything. Maybe you think the secret, while hard, isn't your burden to expose. That's not cowardice if you've weighed the consequences. Some people choose silence because the child is being cared for, the parent is involved privately, and the family is too fragile to handle more. But even then, silence is not easy. You carry that weight. You carry the knowledge that one truth could shake everything. There's also the question of the child's future. Family is more than blood, it's about recognition. What does it mean to be hidden? What does it mean to be excluded? That child may grow up feeling incomplete. And when they learn that the rest of the family existed and stayed silent, it may not just damage one relationship. It may damage their sense of belonging. Let's say the secret stays hidden for 10 years. Then the child shows up. Maybe they've tracked the family down. Maybe something slipped. Now everyone is shocked. The uncle breaks down. His wife is furious. His kids are confused. And the first question they ask isn't just, "Why didn't you tell us?" It's, "Who knew and stayed silent?" That moment matters, because when the truth comes late, it feels like betrayal from everyone involved. And the person who stayed quiet to protect others ends up blamed anyway. You didn't create the secret, but now you're seen as part of it. If you choose silence, you must live with the knowledge that your silence protected a lie. If you choose to speak, you must accept that people might get hurt, but maybe in time they heal. And maybe that child, who never asked for any of this, finally feels seen. There's no easy rule, no perfect choice, just a hard truth and a line in front of you. Either way, you have to pick a side. Either you stand with truth, however difficult, or you stand with secrecy, however well-intentioned. Both come with cost. Both test your character. But only one clears the air and brings everyone into the same light. You work for a company that pays you well. The job is stable, your team is friendly, and your boss seems supportive. Then one day something changes. You see something that shouldn't be happening. Maybe it's the dumping of chemicals into a nearby water source. Maybe it's falsifying safety reports. Or maybe it's cutting corners on a product that could harm people. Whatever it is, it's wrong. And it's not just a mistake. It's systemic. Now you're in a tough position. You could ignore it. That's what most people do at first. You tell yourself it's not your job to fix everything. You look away. You try to forget. But the problem doesn't go away. It gets worse. And you start to feel it. That tension when you walk into the office. That quiet unease when someone mentions the issue. You're not just an employee anymore. You're a witness. You start to ask questions. Is this legal? Is this safe? But no one gives clear answers. Or worse, they tell you to stop asking. Focus on your own work. Don't stir the pot. Some coworkers might agree with you in private, but they won't speak up. They're afraid to. And now you see how deep it runs. At this point, you have to decide. Do you report what you know? Or do you stay silent and keep your job? The risk is real. Whistleblowers often face retaliation. You could lose your job. You could get blacklisted in your field. You might get sued or dragged through court. Your coworkers might turn on you. People you thought were friends might distance themselves. Even your own family might tell you not to go through with it. Just let it go, they might say. It's not worth it. But then you think about what happens if you do nothing. The problem keeps growing. People get hurt. Customers are misled. The environment suffers. Laws are broken. And you knew. That part stays with you. Every time you cash your paycheck, every time the company wins an award or posts profits, you feel it. The guilt, the silence, the knowledge that you could have spoken up and didn't. Suppose you do decide to report it. The first step isn't shouting it from the rooftops. It's documenting what you know. Dates, memos, emails, videos. You don't rely on memory. You gather evidence. You protect yourself. You find out if your company has an internal ethics line. Some companies say they want transparency, but only until it threatens them. So you keep a backup. You save proof outside the company server. You prepare for the fallout. Next, you weigh your options. You can go to internal compliance officers, but if they're compromised, you might need to escalate. In some industries, you can report to regulators, the SEC, OSHA, the EPA, or you might go to the press. Each step comes with risk. Each one demands courage. You don't know how it will play out. You only know that staying silent would make you complicit. Let's take a case. You work at a factory that manufactures consumer electronics. You discover that lithium batteries are being stored improperly. A small leak has already caused a minor fire. Management covers it up. You warn your supervisor. They say, "We're fixing it." But weeks pass and nothing changes. You take photos. You save your emails. You report it to OSHA. Soon, inspectors arrive. The company denies everything. You get called into a meeting. They ask if you made the report. You don't lie. You say yes. The next week, your position is eliminated. They call it restructuring. You know the truth. You file a complaint. You seek legal help. It's a long process. Some days you question your decision. But then the report comes out. The company is fined. They're forced to change safety protocols. No one gets hurt because you spoke up. People think whistleblowing is a moment, but it's a process. It starts with a choice and continues through stress, sacrifice, and sometimes isolation. But it also brings clarity. You find out who you are when no one's watching. You stop compromising. You stop pretending. You also find allies. There are lawyers who protect whistleblowers, agencies that take anonymous reports, journalists who tell your story. Not everyone turns away. Some step forward. They admire what you did. They tell you it mattered. And slowly you see the result. Policies change. Harms are stopped. And you know that speaking up had impact. The fear never fully goes away, but something replaces it: integrity. You did the hard thing, the right thing, not for attention, not for revenge, but because staying silent would have betrayed your values. That's what whistleblowing is: a refusal to participate in harm. And in time, that decision, though it cost you, becomes a part of your story you stand by. Not because it was easy, but because it was yours. You find out your colleague lied on their resume. Maybe they claimed a degree they never finished. Maybe they made up a job title or stretched a few dates. Either way, you've confirmed it. But there's a twist: they're actually good at the job. They meet deadlines. They work well with the team. Clients like them. No one suspects a thing. Now you're stuck with a hard choice. Do you say something or let it go? At first, it may feel like a simple case of deception. Faking qualifications is dishonest. It bypasses rules that everyone else had to follow. You may have spent years earning your degree or building your experience the hard way. They didn't. They skipped the line. That alone stings. But then you look at their work and it's solid. They're pulling their weight, maybe even going beyond it. No one's been hurt, so the question becomes more complicated. If they're doing the job well, does the lie still matter? Let's break it down. Qualifications exist for a reason. They're supposed to ensure people have the skills, training, or background needed to do a job safely and effectively. In fields like medicine, law, or engineering, fake credentials can put lives at risk. Even in less high-stakes jobs, credentials build trust. They tell employers you've met a standard. When someone lies, they break that trust, whether or not the job is being done well. Imagine a nurse who never completed training but learned enough on the job to blend in. They may handle routine work fine, but what happens in a crisis? What if a mistake is made because they missed something covered in formal training? Even in jobs without life or death stakes, similar problems can happen. An unqualified project manager might miss important compliance steps. An underqualified accountant might make a mistake that leads to a fine. The harm might not be visible right away, but it can surface later. Now flip the scenario. Suppose your colleague isn't putting anyone at risk. Their job doesn't require licensure. Maybe it's a creative role, design, marketing, sales, where success is measured by performance, not certificates. They're succeeding. The team is better because they're on it. Does it still matter? Yes, but not in the same way. The lie still signals a willingness to cheat the system. If they lied to get hired, what else might they lie about? Falsifying a resume is a red flag. It doesn't automatically make someone untrustworthy in every area, but it raises doubts, creates a crack in the foundation of trust. You may start to question their stories, their reports, their feedback. You may wonder if they're inflating numbers or covering up problems. This puts you in a difficult spot. If you say something, your colleague could lose their job. Their career could be damaged. You might face backlash. Some people may see you as a snitch or think you're jealous. Others might quietly support you but stay silent. You won't know until it happens. On the other hand, if you say nothing, you become part of the lie. You know the truth and choose to let it stand. One option is to talk to the colleague directly. You say, "I found out something that doesn't line up on your resume. I don't want to make trouble, but I need to understand." This opens the door. They may admit the lie. They may justify it. "I couldn't get interviews without that degree. I had the skills, just not the paper." You listen. You weigh what they say. You can make it clear that you're uncomfortable with dishonesty. You don't have to threaten them, but you don't have to accept it either. This conversation might prompt them to come clean on their own. They might correct their record or speak to management. That's the best-case scenario. They take responsibility. The company decides what to do from there. But suppose they deny everything, or say it's none of your business. Now you're back to your choice. Report it or stay silent. If you choose to report, you go through proper channels, HR, ethics hotline, or direct manager. You present facts, not suspicions. This person claims they worked at X from 2015 to 2018. X has no record of them. Or they list a degree from Y university. The alumni office confirms they didn't graduate. You give the company a chance to handle it quietly and fairly. You're not reporting out of malice. You're protecting standards. You're saying, this matters, because if this person is allowed to fake their way in, it sends a message to everyone else. Integrity is optional. That damages morale. It breeds resentment. People start to think, why should I follow the rules if others don't have to? But if you stay silent, you need to be honest with yourself about what that means. You're choosing to accept a lie. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're prioritizing peace over confrontation. That's a valid choice, but it comes with consequences. If the lie comes out later and the company asks, "Did anyone know?" and you say yes, you might be asked why you stayed quiet, and your silence may be seen as complicity. Now think about your own career. If you were in charge, would you want to hire someone who faked credentials? Even if they performed well, would you trust them long-term? Probably not, because hiring isn't just about skills, it's about values. And if someone lies to get the job, they've already shown what they're willing to do to get ahead. Ultimately, the decision comes down to your values. Do you believe truth matters more than performance? Do you believe standards should apply equally to everyone? Or do you believe results justify the means? There's no easy answer. Whatever you choose, own it. If you report, do it calmly and clearly. If you stay silent, accept the discomfort that comes with that. Either way, you're making a choice about what kind of workplace you want to be part of and what kind of professional you want to be. You're sitting in your manager's office. They offer you a promotion. It's a big step, more responsibility, better pay, a leadership role. But as you hear the offer, something doesn't feel right. There's someone else on your team who has more experience. They've been working longer, handling bigger projects, mentoring others. By most measures, they're the natural choice. And yet, the offer is in front of you. You know the reason. Your manager favors you. Maybe they like your personality more. Maybe you share similar views or backgrounds. Whatever it is, it's not merit. It's favoritism. Now you have a decision. Do you take the promotion, knowing you didn't earn it in full fairness? Or do you step back, speak up, and risk losing the opportunity? First, look closely at the facts. Have you truly been less qualified, or are you underestimating your own contributions? It's easy to assume someone else is better if they've been around longer or are louder in meetings. But maybe your manager sees potential, adaptability, or leadership in you that others haven't noticed. Before jumping to conclusions, assess your own work honestly. Have you led projects, solved problems, taken initiative? If so, you might be more ready than you think. But let's say you've done that assessment and you still believe your colleague deserves it more. You've seen them train others. They've handled difficult clients. They've stayed late to finish critical work. They've delivered under pressure while you were still learning. If the promotion were based purely on performance, it would be theirs. But it's not. It's being handed to you because your manager plays favorites. That puts you in a moral corner. You're not the one who created the unfair situation. You didn't lobby behind someone's back. But by accepting the promotion, you benefit from a system that ignored merit. And your team knows it. Whispers will start. He got it because the boss likes him. She's not ready. Everyone knows that. Those doubts may not be spoken out loud, but they'll sit in the room with you at every meeting. They'll erode your authority. And deep down, they'll erode your own confidence too. So what can you do? You could decline the offer outright. That sends a strong message. Promotions should be earned, not handed out based on personal bias. But that decision has weight. Could strain your relationship with your manager. It might not help your colleague either. Management might simply offer the promotion to someone else, or keep looking until they find someone who says yes. Your gesture of integrity may not fix the system. Another option is to accept the offer, but on your own terms. You say, "I'm honored, but I want to make sure I'm truly ready for this. I know colleague's name has done exceptional work and has more experience in some areas. I want to work closely with them, learn from their strengths, and earn the respect of the team." That doesn't erase the favoritism, but it acknowledges it without calling anyone out. It shows humility. It shows that you're not blind to the politics and that you're committed to rising above them. You could also bring up the issue more directly, but tactfully. Not by accusing your boss of favoritism, but by asking questions. Can I ask what factored into this decision? I want to grow, but I also want to make sure I'm not skipping steps that others have worked hard to reach. This kind of question signals that you care about fairness and that you're aware of the bigger picture. A good leader should respect that. A bad one might not. But their reaction tells you what kind of environment you're in. Let's imagine you take the promotion without saying anything. You tell yourself it's not your fault. You work hard, show up on time, do what's asked. But soon, the team dynamics shift. Your colleague, the one passed over, becomes distant. Others are polite but cool. You sense the doubt in their tone. Every decision you make is second-guessed. Every mistake gets magnified. And you feel the pressure to prove yourself not just as a leader, but as someone who deserved the role in the first place. This pressure is real. It wears on you. You start to work longer hours trying to make up for the gap. But the truth is, no amount of effort can change how the promotion came about. Until you face that, it lingers in the background. Now imagine another version. You talk to your colleague one-on-one. You say, "I know this promotion came as a surprise. I respect your work, and I want to be open with you. I'm going to need your input and guidance. You've built a lot of what this team stands on." That kind of conversation isn't easy. It takes humility, but it can change everything. It turns rivalry into partnership. It shows that you're not insecure, that you value the team over ego. It also sets the tone for how you'll lead. Because if you stay in the role, people will watch not just what you do, but how you carry yourself. Will you share credit? Will you advocate for others? Will you recognize contributions that the system overlooks? If you do, you can slowly build trust, even if the promotion started unfairly. But if you ignore the problem, the resentment may grow. Not just from your team, but within yourself. You'll always wonder if you were chosen for the right reasons. And that shadow will follow you into every future opportunity. You didn't ask to be put in this position. But now that you are, your response matters more than the offer itself. Promotions are about leadership. And leadership is about integrity. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be honest with yourself and with others. Whatever you choose to accept, decline, or accept with conditions, make sure the decision reflects who you are and who you want to become. Because at the end of the day, roles change, titles come and go, but the way you handled this moment will stay with you. You spent weeks on the project. You stayed late, did the research, built the presentation, and solved the hard problems. You checked every detail twice before sending it in. Then came the meeting. Your boss stood up and walked through the entire thing, your slides, your insights, your words, but they didn't mention your name. Not once. They made it sound like the work was theirs. People nodded, impressed. Some even praised them afterward. You sat there, invisible. At first, you might tell yourself it doesn't matter. The team knows you did the work. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they think you helped a little, but that your boss led it. The story is already out there, and now you're stuck with a decision. Do you confront your boss and risk tension, or stay silent and let it go? Before deciding, think about why it happened. Was it intentional? Some bosses genuinely forget to give credit. They're moving fast, focused on delivery, and miss the details. In other cases, it's a pattern. They take credit often. They present others' work as their own to climb higher. Knowing which kind of boss you're dealing with changes how you respond. If it's the first time, start by talking to them directly. You don't accuse. You stay calm. You say, "I noticed in the meeting my name wasn't mentioned when the project was discussed. I'd appreciate being recognized for the work I contributed." That's not confrontation. That's clarity. It gives them a chance to fix it. Maybe they say, "You're right, I should have said something," or they downplay it. It's a team effort, and I was presenting for all of us. That's where you pay attention. If they're defensive or dismissive, it tells you they don't plan to change. But if they're open and correct the record, even privately, then the relationship may still work. Recognition matters, not because you need applause, but because it sets a tone. If your work is always absorbed into someone else's spotlight, your reputation stays small. Promotions, raises, and respect depend on visibility. Without it, you're overlooked. Let's say the pattern continues. Your boss regularly takes credit. You lead a project and they send an update to leadership using your work, but with their name. They call your solution something the team worked on without naming you. Over time, this wears you down. You feel used. You stop sharing ideas freely. You start thinking, what's the point? In that situation, silence only protects the boss. It doesn't protect you. But confrontation doesn't mean shouting or ultimatums. It means building a case. Document your work. Keep copies of emails, drafts, feedback. Make a habit of summarizing key steps and sending updates that include your name. Here's the final version I prepared based on our last discussion. That creates a paper trail. It's not aggressive. It's professional. Next, find ways to make your work visible. When you present, claim your space. Don't say, "I helped with this." Say, "I developed the proposal after reviewing the data." When someone praises your boss for something you did, follow up politely. "Thanks, yes, that part came from the research I did last month." You don't brag. You state facts. If things don't improve, you may need support. A trusted mentor, a colleague who's seen your work, or even HR. This isn't about revenge. It's about fairness. If leadership thinks your boss is producing work they didn't do, that skews decisions. It keeps the wrong person in power and leaves the real contributors in the dark. There's also the option of stepping back and reassessing. Ask yourself, is this the kind of place I want to grow in? If credit is always filtered through someone else, if your voice isn't valued, then it may be time to look elsewhere. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Some people will say it's not worth the trouble, that rocking the boat will only make things harder. But there's a cost to staying quiet. It's not just about this one project. It's about your future. If you let others take your credit without pushback, you teach them that it's okay. And each time it gets harder to speak up. You can be calm and assertive at the same time. You don't have to choose between silence and conflict. There's a middle path, clear, direct communication backed by your record. When your boss takes credit, you don't have to sit in silence. You speak once, then again if needed. You build allies. You stay professional, but you don't disappear. Over time, people notice who really delivers. And when they do, you want your name to be there, not hidden behind someone else's. Your work speaks, but only if you let it be heard. You're sitting at your desk when the message comes in. It's from someone close to you, a friend you've known for years. They say they're looking for a job, and they heard there's an opening on your team. You smile. It's good to hear from them. But as the conversation goes on, your expression tightens. They want you to help them get hired. And they're not asking in a casual way. They want you to push it through. You know the job well. It needs someone with specific skills, maybe technical knowledge, project management, or customer handling experience. Your friend doesn't have them, not even close. Now you're stuck. On one side is loyalty, a friend asking for help. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they just got laid off. You want to support them. You care about them. On the other side is the job, the team, the responsibility. If you recommend someone who's clearly unqualified, it's not just a bad hire. It's your credibility on the line. The team will see it. Your boss will see it. And eventually, so will your friend when they start to drown in work they weren't ready for. You start playing out the outcomes. What if you go along with it? You put in a good word. You soften the resume. You make excuses. Maybe you leave out what they're missing and highlight their general attitude or potential. The hiring process moves forward. They get in. First, they're grateful. You've helped them through a tough time. They say they'll work hard and learn fast. But the job isn't patient. The learning curve is steep. Deadlines hit. Mistakes pile up. The rest of the team has to pick up the slack. Soon, people start asking questions. Why did we hire this person? How did they get through the process? Some say it quietly. Others say it straight. And when the connection to you becomes clear, so does the damage. You put personal loyalty ahead of professional responsibility. You compromised the standard. And now you're not just managing work, you're managing resentment. You might try to coach your friend, help them get up to speed. But the truth is, some roles can't be learned on the fly. If someone doesn't have the base skills, it shows. No amount of goodwill can cover that gap. And now your friend's failure becomes your burden. You feel responsible. You can't give honest feedback without straining the relationship. You can't act as their manager without risking personal fallout. Then there's the long-term risk. If your friend struggles and leaves or gets fired, it won't be a clean exit. It will be emotional. They might say you set them up to fail. They might blame you for not protecting them. What started as a favor becomes a fracture. So you ask yourself, is it worth it? Is this job right now the best way to help this person? Or is there a better way to be a friend? Let's flip the script. You decide not to push the hire. You talk to your friend honestly. You say, this role needs someone with more experience in X area. I don't want to put you in a position where you're set up to fail. You're not closing the door. You're being honest about what's at stake. You might add, let me help you find something that's a better fit. I can help with your resume or connect you to someone else. Your friend may be disappointed, maybe even hurt. They might say, I thought you'd have my back. That stings, but it's a short-term wound. Over time, if the friendship is real, they'll see what you did. You respected them enough to tell the truth. You didn't feed them into a machine they weren't built for. You chose honesty over convenience. That kind of integrity lasts longer than a favor. You also protect your team. You respect their time, their effort, and the standards they rely on. Good teams are built on trust. They expect every member to carry their weight. If you undermine that with a political or personal hire, it spreads. People stop trusting the system. They start asking, why should I work hard if someone can just skip the line? Hiring is more than a transaction. It's a statement of values. Every time you make a hire, you say, this is the kind of person we want here. If that choice is based on friendship instead of fit, your values shift. Slowly, the culture shifts too. And once culture starts to bend, it's hard to straighten it back. Let's say you're under pressure. Maybe the request didn't come from the friend directly. Maybe it came from above, from someone you can't easily say no to. A boss, a stakeholder, a client. They say, do me a favor, bring this person in. The pressure is real. You don't want to damage relationships or cause friction. But now the risk is bigger. If you hire under pressure and it backfires, you don't just lose credibility, you show that your standards are negotiable. The better move is to stay firm but diplomatic. I've looked at the resume. I don't think this is the right role for them. It would hurt the team and set them up for struggle. I'd rather help them find something where they can succeed. If you're in charge of hiring, that's your role, to guard the gate. Not to shut people out unfairly, but to make sure the right people come through. If that includes friends, great, but only if they're qualified. Not because they asked, not because it's easy, but because they earned it. Being a good friend doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Sometimes it means saying, not this one. Sometimes it means being the only person who tells the truth when others won't. That's harder, but it's more loyal in the long run. Because loyalty that costs your team, your standards, and your own integrity isn't loyalty. It's avoidance. And once you trade standards for favors, it gets harder to come back. Every future decision carries that shadow. You're not just hiring an employee, you're defining a culture. And culture starts with one choice. Choose carefully, choose clearly, choose in a way you won't regret, even if it risks a friendship, because real friends can handle the truth. And real leaders give it. You're sitting beside a hospital bed. The patient is someone you care about, maybe a parent, a sibling, or a friend. They've been fighting for months. The cancer has spread. The treatments no longer work. Pain meds only dull the edge. They're tired. They can't eat much. They can't move without help. Every day feels like a slow fade. And one day, they tell you clearly with full awareness, I want this to end. I don't want to keep suffering like this. Please help me. Now you're facing a choice that pushes against the boundaries of law, medicine, and morality. On one side, there's compassion, the human instinct to ease suffering. On the other, there's the law. In many places, helping someone die, even if they ask, is considered illegal. Even where it's legal, strict procedures must be followed. The law is designed to protect life, but it can feel like it prolongs pain. You don't want them to suffer, but you also know the risks. If you help them die by giving access to lethal medication, or even by withholding food and water, you could face legal charges. In some places, that includes prison. Doctors risk losing their licenses. Family members risk losing everything. But what weighs heavier isn't always the law. It's the look in their eyes. It's the quiet desperation when they say, "Please." The law tends to follow tradition. For centuries, death was something doctors were taught to fight off at all costs. Do no harm meant preserving life under any condition. But now the idea of harm has shifted. When life becomes nothing but pain, many argue that forcing someone to continue is a greater harm than helping them go. That's where the debate around assisted dying begins. Some countries and states allow it under strict conditions. The patient must be terminally ill. They must be mentally competent. They must make the request multiple times. 2 doctors must agree. Sometimes a judge is involved. These safeguards are meant to make sure the decision is voluntary, informed, and free from pressure. But many people don't live in places where this is legal. And that's when the situation becomes personal. You may agree with the law or disagree with it, but now it's your loved one, not a debate on the news. They can't wait for laws to change. They can't file motions or appeal policies. They're suffering now, and they want relief now. You sit in that room and think through your options. You could support their wish emotionally, but stop short of helping in any physical way. You could stay with them, hold their hand, and give them comfort, even if they continue suffering. That's the safest option legally, but it may feel like betrayal, like turning your back when they asked for your help the most. You could also speak to their medical team. Some doctors will increase palliative care, higher doses of morphine, stronger sedatives. These drugs may ease pain so deeply that the patient slips into unconsciousness and eventually dies. This isn't the same as assisted suicide, but in practice, it can lead to the same outcome. It's sometimes called terminal sedation. It's not about ending life directly. It's about ending pain, knowing that the life may follow. In most places, this is legal, but it requires trust between doctor, patient, and family. Not all hospitals offer it. Not all doctors agree with it. You might also hear your loved one say they want to stop eating and drinking. That's one of the few legal ways a patient can control the end of their life. It's called VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. It sounds brutal, but for many, it's a peaceful way out. The body shuts down slowly. The person sleeps more and more. With proper care, the process can be painless, but it takes days, and it requires resolve. Now imagine you're the one they ask to help speed it up. "Just give me something," they say. "You know what I want. Please." You're not a doctor. You don't have prescriptions, but you might have sleeping pills, painkillers. You might think, it wouldn't take much. You look at the law. You look at their face. You wonder what kind of person you'll be when this is over. Some people do it quietly. They crush the pills, dissolve them in water, and help the person drink. They don't talk about it later. They don't tell anyone. The patient dies peacefully, but the person who helped carries the weight. They live with the memory, the secrecy, the risk, and sometimes they're reported. A nurse finds out. A relative disagrees. The police get involved. What started as mercy becomes a courtroom story. Others refuse. They say, "I can't help you with this." They stand by, they stay near, but they don't cross that line. It's not because they don't care. It's because they do, and because the law scares them, or their conscience says no. And that's valid too. Everyone has a different line they can't cross. No one should be forced to go further than they can live with. There's also the fear of regret. What if the person changes their mind? What if they were just having a dark day? What if a new treatment appears? That's why legal systems put time buffers into the process. Waiting periods, counseling, second opinions. These aren't just red tape, they're safety nets. Once a life ends, there's no undo button. So what do you do? Support their wish or follow the law? The answer depends on what kind of support they're asking for. If it's comfort, presence, honesty, you can give that without breaking any law. You can hold their hand. You can say, "I understand." You can help them talk to a doctor about pain control. You can help them prepare mentally and spiritually. If they want more, if they want direct help ending their life, you face a risk that no one else can take for you. The law may not be on your side, but maybe your heart is, or maybe your heart says no. Either way, you carry the weight of that choice for the rest of your life. Not all laws are just. Not all suffering is necessary, but not all choices should be rushed. In the end, it comes down to one question. Can you live with what you do next? And that answer is yours alone. 2 patients, 1 ventilator. Both are critically ill. You stand in the hospital room as their oxygen levels drop. Monitors beep. Nurses move fast. Families wait outside, hoping for good news. But there's only one machine left, and you have to choose who gets it. This isn't a thought experiment. It's a decision doctors and nurses around the world have faced in real emergencies. War zones, disaster sites, overwhelmed hospitals during pandemics. It doesn't feel like medicine. It feels like judgment. But someone has to make the call. The first instinct is to look for guidance. Hospital ethics boards often have triage protocols for moments like this. They rely on principles that aim to be fair, not personal. The idea is to avoid arbitrary decisions, to take the pressure off individual doctors. But no policy can fully erase the weight of the choice. Start with one approach. Maximize the chance of survival. This means the patient with the better odds gets the machine. Maybe one patient is 30 years old with no other conditions, and their lungs are holding on. The other is 75, already on dialysis with heart disease. If you put the ventilator on the younger patient, they might recover. The older one may not survive even with help. This approach sounds cold, but it's based on utility. Save the life you have the best chance of saving. But what if both have similar odds? Same age, same background, both with families. You check the data. One has slightly better oxygenation. The other is deteriorating faster. Still, the difference is slim. What then? Some suggest using a scoring system, like SOFA, Sequential Organ Failure Assessment. It ranks patients based on how many systems in the body are failing. The lower the score, the better the odds. The machine goes to the one with the better score. It's not personal, it's clinical. That keeps the process grounded in evidence, not emotion. But not all situations allow for scoring. Sometimes decisions come fast. There's no time to analyze, just 2 faces, 2 charts, 1 machine. Now emotion creeps in. One patient is a single parent with 2 young kids. The other is a retired teacher, beloved in the community. You start thinking about lives beyond the room. But is that fair? Should family status, social value, or age influence the decision? Some ethicists argue for a lottery system when the odds are equal. You flip a coin. It removes bias. No one can claim the process was unfair. But lotteries feel mechanical, cold. You're choosing between lives, not numbers. And yet, when all other measures fail, chance may be the only equalizer. Others suggest a first-come, first-served rule. Whoever got sick first keeps the spot. But that system favors people who live closer to the hospital or who arrived on time. It may ignore whose condition is more treatable. It rewards luck, not need. In high-pressure settings, that can feel unjust. Then there's the reverse idea. Give the machine to the one who will need it for the shortest time. That way, more lives can be saved overall. If patient A needs the ventilator for 2 days and patient B would need it for 10, you help A first, then move to B if B is still alive. But this logic assumes accurate predictions, and medicine doesn't always allow for that. People surprise you. Some rally, some collapse. Ethics committees sometimes prioritize healthcare workers. During a pandemic, for example, doctors and nurses might get ventilators first. Not because their lives are more valuable, but because they can return to the front lines and save more people. It's a strategy. Protect the system that protects everyone. But even that idea raises hard questions. Should the ability to help others determine access to care? Now imagine a different version. You place the ventilator on one patient. They stabilize, but the other begins to crash. A nurse looks at you and says, "Switch it. They're younger. They'll make it." Do you remove the machine from a stable patient to help someone else? That introduces another moral layer. Once a resource is given, do you take it back? Most protocols say no. Once treatment starts, you don't pull it to help someone else. unless the original patient shows no signs of recovery. Otherwise, you enter dangerous ground. The act of removing support becomes active harm, not just a choice of allocation. You protect the person you've started helping. It gives some moral clarity, but it means later patients might suffer more simply because of timing. You also think of the families. They don't see data. They see their child, their partner, their parent. They ask you to save them. They beg. They pray. And you have to say no. Not because you don't care, but because the machine is in use. And the system you follow doesn't allow swapping based on emotion. No matter what you choose, someone loses. And you have to live with that. You go home knowing one bed is empty. One life ended. And you played a role in that. Even if the system backed your choice, the human cost stays with you. That's why transparency matters. When hospitals explain how decisions are made, it protects staff and builds public trust. Families know there's a method, not just impulse. And patients know they weren't dismissed, even if they weren't chosen. In the end, you aim to do the most good with what you have. You don't play favorites. You follow protocols. You use your training. But you never forget the faces behind the charts. You never let efficiency erase compassion. And when it's over, when the machine hums beside one bed and not the other, you sit for a moment in silence. Because no matter how fair the decision, the weight of it never really lifts. You're a therapist, or a counselor, or a doctor. You're sitting across from a patient. The room is quiet, confidential. The patient leans in and says something that freezes you. Maybe it's, "I'm thinking about hurting someone." Maybe it's, "I've planned it." They don't shout. They don't look wild. But they're serious. And now you're holding something dangerous. Your role is built on trust. Patients come to you because they believe what they say will stay in the room. That's the foundation. Without it, they stay silent or they lie. Confidentiality isn't just ethical, it's practical. It makes healing possible. But it's not absolute. There are limits, and one of those limits is safety. Most countries and states have what's called a duty to warn or duty to protect. If a patient makes a credible threat to harm someone, you may be required to report it. Not because you want to break trust, but because someone's life could be in danger, and doing nothing could cost lives. You start with the details. What exactly did the patient say? Was it vague? "Sometimes I wish I could just hurt them." Or was it specific? "I'm going to kill them next week. I have the knife. I know where they live." The difference matters. General anger, even violent fantasies, are common in therapy. People say dark things in safe spaces. But when a plan forms, when intent, means, and target come together, it crosses a line. You assess the threat. Is it credible? Immediate? Is the person capable of carrying it out? Do they have a history of violence? Are they under the influence? Do they know their target personally? You ask questions calmly, without judgment. You don't push, but you don't ignore. You listen for patterns. You look for escalation. If you believe the threat is real, you have to act. That doesn't always mean calling the police right away. You may first consult your supervisor or legal advisor. You document everything word for word, time and date. You protect yourself and your license. But if there's a clear and present danger, most laws protect you when you break confidentiality to prevent harm. Now the hard part. You tell the patient. You say, "I want to help you through this, but if I believe someone is in danger, I'm required to take steps to keep them safe." You're honest, not harsh, just clear. Some patients will get angry. Some will panic. Others will shut down. That's why you speak calmly. You don't accuse. You explain that the goal is safety for everyone, including them. You might call a crisis team, or law enforcement, or the intended target. Some states require you to warn the person directly. Others require you to notify authorities. It depends on where you practice, but the core principle stays the same. You take reasonable steps to prevent harm. Let's take a scenario. A patient says they plan to harm a former partner. They describe the partner by name. They know their schedule. They've bought a weapon. They say, "I'm done waiting." That's not therapy anymore. That's a threat. You call your supervisor. You alert law enforcement. You document the call. You protect the potential victim. Or take another case. A teenager says they hate a classmate. They joke about violence. You ask if they've made a plan. They say no. They laugh it off. But you notice something. Their tone doesn't match the words. You probe. You ask more. You find out they've drawn pictures, written posts online, searched for weapons. You may not have a full plan, but you have enough to act. You consult your school's threat team or mental health coordinator. You notify the parents. You don't wait. Some cases aren't as clear. The patient says, "I've been thinking about hurting someone. I don't know if I'd actually do it." They describe intrusive thoughts, images they can't control, but no intent, no plan. This may be a symptom of trauma, anxiety, OCD, or something else. You keep confidentiality. You work through it in therapy. You monitor for changes. You build trust. You keep them engaged. The goal is never punishment. It's prevention. You're not calling the police to get someone arrested. You're acting to stop something from happening. And often that action becomes a turning point. The patient gets the help they need. The potential victim is warned. The threat is diffused. But it only works if you're willing to act. Sometimes people ask if this destroys the therapeutic relationship. It can. Some patients leave. Some never trust again. But others return. They say, "You did the right thing." They realize that safety isn't the enemy of healing. It's the foundation of it. And you show that boundaries don't mean betrayal. They mean responsibility. You also protect yourself. If harm occurs and you did nothing, you could face consequences, legal, professional, even moral. Courts have ruled that therapists who fail to act on credible threats can be held liable. So you don't just think about trust. You think about duty. You think about lives. It's not easy. You don't want to break confidentiality. You don't want to see a patient handcuffed. But you also don't want to hear that someone was attacked or killed when you had the chance to stop it. This is the line you walk. Every session, every hour, you build trust. You listen to pain. You hold dark truths. But when one of those truths turns into danger, you step in. Not because you stopped caring, but because you care enough to act. You sit with the discomfort. You follow the law. You protect life. Even when it costs something. Even when it's hard. Because in that moment, safety must come first. Patient sits across from you. They're sick. Maybe terminal. Maybe they've tried every approved treatment. Now they're asking for something different, an experimental drug, a new procedure, something they read about online or saw in a clinical trial registry. It's not approved. It hasn't passed full testing. It might help. It might hurt. And they look at you hoping you'll say yes. You don't answer right away. You weigh the facts. First, what kind of treatment is this? Is it in early stage testing? Is it part of a trial that stopped early? Is it being offered under compassionate use or expanded access? The more unknowns there are, the more careful you have to be. Some treatments are still in animal testing. Others have only gone through a phase 1 trial with no proof they work, only that they might not kill someone outright. Now you consider the patient. How sick are they? Is their condition stable, or are they running out of time? Have they exhausted all standard care options? If this treatment fails, do they have other choices? Or is this the end of the road? If the patient is terminal, the risk may feel justified. But feeling isn't enough. You need more. You think about harm. Not just physical harm like side effects or complications, but emotional, financial, and psychological damage. An unproven treatment might cause organ failure. It might worsen symptoms. It might give false hope, which in many ways is its own kind of cruelty. If the treatment delays better palliative care or keeps the patient tied to false outcomes, it can rob them of a peaceful exit. You think about trust. The patient came to you because they believed you'd guide them wisely. If you say yes too quickly, you blur the line between science and speculation. If you say no without listening, you shut down a person who may feel like they have no other voice. You ask yourself what the treatment is based on. Is there a study? Even a small one? Is there a plausible biological mechanism? Or is it hype wrapped in medical terms? Sometimes companies push unproven drugs to desperate people. They hide behind language that sounds scientific but means nothing. Your job is to cut through that noise. Let's say the treatment comes from a real lab. It's shown promise in mice. 1 or 2 humans have tried it. No disasters, but no clear success either. The patient says, "I know the risks. I want to try." You look at the data. It's incomplete. There's no dosage guideline, no long-term follow-up, no peer-reviewed study, just a hunch, a lab result, and a plea. You explain the situation clearly. This treatment isn't proven. It might not work, could make things worse. You might feel sicker, lose function, or spend your final weeks in a hospital instead of at home. You're not being cruel. You're telling the truth. You lay it out, what you know, what you don't, what the risks are. You ask the patient to explain back what they heard. You check for understanding. You ask, "Are you looking for a cure or for a chance to try something, even if it doesn't help?" If the patient still says yes, you ask yourself, are you acting as a healer or just enabling desperation? If your role is to relieve suffering, then the treatment must do more good than harm. But what if the hope itself brings peace? Some patients don't want more time. They want one last act of agency, one last choice. You consider ethics. The principle of autonomy says patients should control their own bodies. But autonomy doesn't mean offering anything they ask for. You still have to act within professional limits. If you don't believe the treatment meets a reasonable medical standard, you have the right to say no. Sometimes there's a legal path. The FDA's expanded access program lets patients try investigational drugs outside of clinical trials. It requires physician agreement, company approval, and regulatory clearance. That gives structure. It adds safety checks. You can offer the treatment within that framework if the company agrees. Some won't. They don't want liability. They don't want bad data on a weak trial. There's also the right to try law. It bypasses some regulatory steps. It gives patients the chance to use drugs after phase 1 testing, even if they're not yet approved. Critics say it's risky. Supporters say it returns power to patients. Either way, it shifts more responsibility to you. If you agree to give the drug, you may be alone if things go wrong. You talk to the family. You say, "We're looking at a treatment with limited data. It's not guaranteed. We need to make sure everyone understands what this means." You bring in ethics consultants if needed. You don't move fast. You document everything: the risks, the expectations, the reasons for saying yes or no. Now flip the case. You decline. You tell the patient you can't give a treatment with no proven benefit and real risks. You offer palliative support. You guide them to spend time with family, to live their final days in peace. You say, "I know you want to fight, but this fight may not help you. It may take more than it gives." The patient cries. They may be angry. They may feel abandoned. But you don't lie. You don't offer false cures. You stay with them even if it means saying no. You're not here to give false hope. You're not here to take it away either. You're here to tell the truth and help patients make decisions with open eyes. If the treatment is promising but unproven, you try to enroll them in a trial. That gives support, monitoring, and structure. If no trial exists, you explain why. If the treatment has a history of harm, you show the data. If there's a safe way to try it, you take it. But only if the risk is justified, not just by desperation, but by evidence. In the end, your job is not to promise life at any cost. It's to guard life from harm and help patients make choices they can live and die with. You respect their voice, but you protect their safety. And when you can't give a cure, you give clarity. Because in moments like this, clarity is its own kind of care. You're standing in the hospital room. A child lies in the bed, pale, breathing unevenly, monitored by machines. The diagnosis is clear. The treatment is available. The prognosis, if treated, is good. Without it, the child will likely die. You explain this carefully to the parents. They listen. They ask questions. Then they tell you no. They refuse the treatment, not because they doubt the science, but because their religion forbids it. Maybe it's a blood transfusion. Maybe it's an organ transplant. Either way, the line is firm. They believe the treatment violates their faith. And now you're holding the weight of two responsibilities: respect the family's beliefs or protect the child's life. You don't have time to hesitate. This isn't theory, it's a medical emergency. The child didn't choose the religion. The child didn't refuse the treatment. The parents did. And as a doctor, nurse, or hospital staff member, you have a duty to protect the patient, especially when the patient is a minor who cannot speak for themselves. You start with clarity. You tell the parents, again, what the treatment will do. You explain the risks. You use simple language. Without this, your child will go into shock. Their organs will fail. They won't survive. You answer questions without judgment. You don't mock their beliefs. You don't argue theology. But you don't soften the facts. Then you ask why. You let them explain. They may say, "We believe life is sacred, but so is obedience to God." Or, "We've prayed, and we believe a miracle will happen." You listen not to agree, but to understand what you're up against. Because understanding helps you prepare your next step. Legal intervention. Most countries and states recognize that parents have wide rights to raise their children according to their values. But those rights are not unlimited. The law draws a clear boundary. When parental choices endanger a child's life, the state can step in. That's where child protection laws come into play. They exist to make sure that a child's right to life and health isn't overridden by adult ideology, even when it comes from deeply held faith. So you act. You alert the hospital's legal team or child protection office. You report the refusal. You document everything: the diagnosis, the recommended treatment, the parent's response, and your efforts to communicate. You don't delay because time lost could mean a life lost. In many places, the law allows doctors to provide emergency care without parental consent if the child is at risk of serious harm or death. This principle is called parens patriae, the state's duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Under this rule, the hospital can seek a court order to temporarily override the parent's authority and allow treatment. The court process moves quickly in urgent cases. Judges understand the stakes. A hospital attorney files an emergency petition. A judge reviews the medical evidence. If the case is strong, and it usually is when the treatment is clearly life-saving, the judge grants temporary custody or orders the treatment directly. The parents are informed. Security may be called if needed, and the child receives care. Some hospitals have dealt with these cases before. Blood transfusions are one of the most common conflicts. Certain religious groups, like Jehovah's Witnesses, reject them entirely. Others may refuse chemotherapy or vaccinations. But the logic is the same: belief collides with medicine. And when the patient is a child, belief takes a back seat to survival. The ethical side is harder. You may feel torn. You don't want to break the bond between the child and the parents. You don't want to create fear or resentment. But your role isn't to preserve family harmony. It's to protect the child. And at that moment, protection means action. Let's take an example. An 8-year-old girl is rushed to the ER with internal bleeding after an accident. She's losing blood fast. Her hemoglobin is dangerously low. The team prepares for a transfusion. The parents arrive and say, "No blood. Our faith forbids it." You explain the danger. You give time for questions. But the bleeding continues. There's no safe alternative. You notify the legal team. An emergency order is granted within hours. The child receives the transfusion. She stabilizes. Later, she returns home, alive and with a future. Now picture a different case. A boy with leukemia needs chemotherapy. His parents believe only natural remedies are acceptable. They pull him from the hospital and say, "We'll treat him with herbs and prayer." In that case, the harm is slower but still deadly. The hospital alerts social services. The case is reviewed. A court may order the child to return for treatment. If the parents refuse, custody can be temporarily transferred to a guardian who authorizes medical care. These cases are rare, but they cut deep. They test the boundaries of culture, law, and medicine. But one rule holds: children have a right to medical care that can save their lives. And when adults stand in the way, no matter the reason, the system has a duty to intervene. That doesn't mean the parents are evil. Often, they love their child deeply. They truly believe they're doing the right thing. But love isn't enough when the body is failing. Faith doesn't restore blood volume. Prayer doesn't stop septic shock. Medicine does, and your job is to deliver it, even if it means going through a judge. After treatment, you work to repair trust. You help the parents stay involved. You let them hold their child. You explain what happened and why. You say, "We did this to save your child. You may not agree, but we had to act." Some parents accept that, some don't, but the child survives. And in the end, that's what matters most. You'll carry the memory of the decision, the quiet tension, the pressure, the moment the order came through. You'll remember the child's face, the parent's eyes, the weight of acting against belief. But you'll also remember why you did it. Not out of arrogance, not out of disrespect, but out of duty. Because when belief and life conflict, and the patient can't choose, the answer must protect the life. Every time a student comes to you after class, their voice is quiet. They avoid eye contact. They say they've been having a hard time. Maybe it's depression. Maybe someone close to them died. Maybe it's something they can't explain. All they ask is for some grace, some adjustment to their grade. Not extra credit, not a retake, just consideration. They know they didn't do well on the last exam or paper. They're not trying to excuse it, they say. They just want to know if there's anything you can do. Now you're sitting with two responsibilities. One is to the student in front of you. The other is to the standards you've built for the entire class. You want to be kind, but you also want to be fair. You believe grades should reflect learning. That's the whole point. But you also know grades are never just numbers. They represent people with lives outside the classroom, lives that sometimes break under pressure. You take a breath and ask yourself what fair really means here. Is it fair to treat everyone exactly the same, no matter their situation? Or is it fair to make room for real-life struggles when they impact performance? If a student broke their arm and couldn't write for a week, you'd consider accommodations. So what do you do when the injury is emotional? When it doesn't show on a scan, but it still cripples their focus, their memory, their ability to function? You think about the work. Has the student been engaged during the term? Were they doing well before the struggle started? Did their performance drop suddenly, or have they been slipping for a while? If they were consistent until recently, that tells you the issue is new and possibly temporary. If they've been struggling all term, that suggests deeper problems that might need long-term support, not just a grade adjustment. You ask whether they've reached out to counseling services or student support. You want to make sure they're getting help beyond just your classroom. If they haven't, you refer them, not to dismiss them, but because adjusting a grade won't fix what's underneath. You're a teacher, not a therapist. But part of teaching is knowing when to connect a student to the right kind of help. Then you look at your syllabus. What does it say about grading? About missed work? About late submissions or emergencies? If you've built in flexibility like dropping the lowest quiz or offering makeup work, those tools might already serve the student without needing a grade change. You can remind them, your final grade automatically drops your lowest test, so this one won't weigh as heavily. That gives comfort without bending rules. If no such policies exist, and the student's situation is serious, you might consider incomplete status. That allows the student to finish the work later without being penalized now. It's not a grade gift. It's time. An extra chance to meet the same expectations as everyone else. But it requires clear deadlines and follow-up. Without that, it just becomes a way to delay the problem. Let's say the student doesn't want an extension. They just want you to change the weight of one assignment or curve their grade upward. That's the hard part, because now you're altering the framework. And that affects everyone, even if they never find out. You might justify it by saying, it's just one student, one time, but it sets a precedent. The next time someone asks, how do you say no? The system starts to blur. At the same time, ignoring context can feel inhuman. Imagine two students who both fail a test. One didn't study, the other was dealing with a trauma. Do they deserve the same outcome? If all you look at is the score, yes. If you care about learning and growth, maybe not. That's the tension between equity and equality. One treats everyone the same. The other tries to give each person what they need to succeed. You ask yourself one more thing. Will adjusting the grade help the student in the long run? Or will it reinforce a pattern of avoidance? Some students learn resilience when they face consequences and recover. Others spiral. A small boost might be the encouragement they need to stay in school. But it can't be blind charity. It has to be tied to something: effort, progress, or accountability. Maybe you meet them halfway. You say, "I can't change your grade for this assignment, but if you complete this optional project, I'll count it toward your final average." That keeps the standards intact while giving them a path forward. They still have to earn the outcome, but you're not shutting the door. You also reflect on your teaching structure. If one crisis can wreck a student's grade beyond repair, maybe the grading system is too brittle. Good assessment allows for fluctuation. It gives students room to fail, recover, and learn. If your system doesn't, no adjustment feels fair, because the system itself isn't. You document the interaction, not to protect yourself, but to keep track of decisions. If your grading is ever questioned, you want to show you acted with consistency and care. And if the student improves later, you'll have a record of the turning point. In the end, you make a decision. Maybe it's a no, because changing the grade would compromise fairness. Maybe it's a yes, because the student has shown effort, integrity, and growth, even in pain. Or maybe it's a not yet, because they need time to catch up. Whatever you choose, it's not about favoritism. It's about weighing compassion against consistency, about honoring both the rules and the people who live within them, and about remembering that teaching isn't just about points. It's about helping people move forward, even when the path is rough. You're sitting at your desk, red pen in hand or cursor blinking on the screen. A stack of papers waits. You've graded 10 already, some strong, some average, a few disappointing. Then you come to one with a familiar name. It's your friend's work, someone you've had meals with, shared rides with, laughed with. You start reading, and almost immediately you see it's not good. The structure is off. The argument is unclear. The sources are weak. Maybe they misunderstood the prompt. Maybe they didn't try. Either way, it's below the standard you've set for the class. And now the pressure shifts. You're not just a teacher evaluating a student. You're a friend deciding whether to be honest or soft. You pause. You know what a fair grade would look like. Somewhere in the low range, maybe a C, maybe lower. But you also know how your friend might react. They might take it personally. They might feel betrayed. They might think, "You could have helped me out." They might stop trusting you. That thought lingers, tempts you. Maybe wouldn't be so bad. Maybe if you stretch the rubric, you can justify a higher grade. Maybe just this once. But then you stop. You're not just grading a paper. You're deciding what kind of teacher you want to be and what kind of friend. Grading isn't just feedback. It's a promise. You told every student at the start of the course, "This is what I expect. This is how I'll assess you." Everyone will be treated the same. If you give your friend an easy grade, you break that promise. Quietly, maybe, but you break it, and the harm doesn't stop at the grade. Think about the rest of the class. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but they trust the process. They trust that effort matters, that fairness matters. If word gets out that your friend got special treatment, and it often does, that trust evaporates. Other students start wondering if the game is rigged. If some people get cushions and others don't. That corrodes the learning environment, and it doesn't come back easily. Now think about your friend. What does it say about your friendship if you have to compromise your integrity to protect it? That's not real trust. That's silence. If your friend only values you when you bend the rules for them, what kind of relationship is that? A real friend can hear hard truths. They might not like them, but they can take them. You keep reading the paper. You look at your rubric. You go line by line. You don't grade with malice. You don't punish. You just stay honest. You write clear comments. This paragraph loses focus. The thesis isn't fully developed. Citations don't follow the format. You point out what worked, even if it's small. This example was a good start. You make it constructive, but you don't inflate. Then you enter the grade. It stings. You imagine the look on your friend's face, the awkward text, maybe the cold tone at the next get-together. But you don't undo it. You stand by it. Because fairness isn't just about other students. It's about you. Afterward, you think about reaching out. You send a message, "Hey, I finished grading. I wanted to be upfront. Your paper didn't meet the usual standard. I gave honest feedback. If you want to go over it, I'm happy to talk." That gives space. It shows you care. It opens the door without backing down. Maybe your friend replies with frustration. "Really? You couldn't cut me a break." You breathe. Then you say, "If I give you something you didn't earn, it doesn't help you. I'd rather be honest and still be your friend than lie to protect a grade." That might land. It might not, but it's true. You remind yourself, your role is not to rescue. It's to guide. Sometimes guidance means letting someone stumble. You know that a low grade on one assignment isn't the end. If your friend cares, they'll reflect. They'll grow. Maybe next time they'll try harder. Maybe they'll ask for help earlier. And maybe they'll respect you more, not less, for holding the line. Now imagine the opposite. You give the better grade. You soften the comments. The paper gets a B. It sails through, but the guilt sits in your chest. You know you weren't fair. The friend doesn't learn. They keep thinking they're doing fine. Maybe they repeat the same mistakes. Maybe the next teacher isn't lenient. Suddenly they're blindsided, and it started with your silence. You also risk setting a pattern. If your friend ever asks, "Can you help me again?" you'll feel trapped. The more you bend once, the easier it is to bend again. And soon you're not teaching, you're covering. That's a loss, for them and for you. Grading is a form of respect. When you give honest feedback, you're telling someone, "I believe you can do better." When you hand out favors, you're saying, "You're not strong enough to earn this on your own." One builds confidence, the other builds dependence. It's not always clean. It may hurt the friendship. It may take time to repair, but it keeps your values intact. And over time, people remember who told them the truth when it counted. Not who gave them what they wanted, but who gave them what they needed. You finish grading the rest of the papers. You hold each one to the same standard. You close the laptop. You carry the weight of a difficult choice knowing it was the right one. Because being fair isn't always easy, but it's always right. You walk into class every day and notice the same pattern. The teacher always calls on the same 3 students. They get more praise, more leniency on late work. They're allowed to speak longer in discussions. Sometimes they interrupt others and aren't corrected. When their answers are wrong, they're treated as almost right. When other students make mistakes, they're quickly shut down. Over time, it becomes clear the teacher has favorites. First, you try to brush it off. Teachers are human. Maybe they connect better with certain personalities. Maybe those students just participate more. But then it starts to affect more than class discussion. Their grades seem higher even when their work isn't stronger. They get more chances to revise. One of them forgets an assignment and gets a free pass. Another misses a deadline and still gets full credit. Meanwhile, you and others follow the rules and don't get the same treatment. You start to hear murmurs. Classmates talk after school or in private group chats. "She always picks them. I got marked down for the same thing he did and he got an A." It's not even subtle anymore. That's when you realize it's not just you. Now you're stuck with a decision. Do you report it or stay quiet and hope it passes? Favoritism in class isn't just frustrating. It's unfair. Schools are supposed to offer equal opportunity. When a teacher shows clear bias, it damages trust in the classroom. It tells students that effort doesn't matter as much as being liked. Over time, that affects morale. Students check out. They stop trying. They assume the outcome is fixed. That's not just bad for grades. It's bad for learning. But reporting a teacher is not a small step. It comes with risks. You wonder if it will make things worse. If the teacher finds out, will they retaliate? Will your other teachers hear about it? Will you get labeled as a troublemaker? These are real concerns. especially if you don't have strong support from adults in the school. Still, if the behavior is persistent and clearly affects the learning environment, it's not something to ignore. So the question becomes how you report it and who you tell. Start by gathering your observations. Don't rely on general feelings. Write down specific examples. On March 14th, the teacher gave student A an extension without asking, while student B was denied one the same day. Student C's presentation received a 95 despite missing key points listed in the rubric. Keep it factual. Stick to patterns, not emotions. Once you have a few clear examples, decide who to approach. If you feel comfortable, the first step might be the teacher themselves. You could say, "I've noticed that some students seem to get more attention or flexibility. It's starting to affect how others feel in class. I wanted to share that because it's making it hard to stay motivated." This approach only works if the teacher is open to feedback. Some are, some aren't. If the favoritism is unconscious, they may appreciate the perspective. If it's deliberate, they may get defensive. If a direct conversation isn't safe or practical, go to a counselor, academic advisor, or department head. You explain what you've noticed. You present your examples. You say, "I'm not trying to cause problems, but this situation is affecting how the class works, and I think it should be looked into." Most schools have procedures for addressing teacher conduct. A good administrator will take your concerns seriously without exposing you. Some students choose to report anonymously. That's often an option through a school suggestion box or an online form. It protects your identity but may limit follow-up. If you're the only one raising the concern, it can be hard for the school to act. But if others have spoken up too, your report adds weight. In some cases, favoritism may not be malicious. It could come from unconscious bias. A teacher may not realize they're calling on the same students, or may have built habits that favor certain types of participation. If that's the case, training and feedback can help. Schools often provide professional development for exactly these issues, but sometimes it's deeper. Some teachers build personal bonds with students that go too far. Maybe they were their coach. Maybe their families know each other. Maybe they just click. That's not illegal, but it's inappropriate if it affects grading, participation, or feedback. Teachers are professionals. They're expected to separate personal feelings from classroom responsibilities. If the situation is more extreme, if grades are being changed, if certain students are clearly being shielded from consequences, it may be a matter for the principal or even the school board. You don't have to jump there immediately, but if lower-level conversations don't lead to change, escalation is sometimes necessary. The important thing is to stay clear and steady. You're not accusing someone of being a bad person. You're describing a pattern that hurts fairness. You're protecting your right to learn in an environment where every student is treated the same. You might wonder, what if nothing changes? That's always a possibility. Not every report leads to immediate results, but speaking up still matters, puts the issue on the radar. It may encourage others to step forward, and it tells the system that someone noticed, that students are paying attention. If you don't feel ready to report, there are still ways to cope. Talk with classmates, build support, hold each other accountable, share notes, stay engaged. Sometimes collective strength helps offset unfairness, even if the system doesn't respond. But if the problem is serious and it affects how students succeed, it deserves to be reported. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of principle. Because fairness in class isn't a bonus. It's the baseline. And when it's broken, it needs to be repaired. Even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable, that's how things change. The project is done. Slides finalized. Report submitted. Presentation delivered. Your group sits together waiting for the grade. Everyone looks tired but satisfied, except for one person. They look just as pleased as the rest, even though you know they didn't do much. In fact, they did almost nothing. They showed up late to meetings, made vague suggestions, and disappeared when it came time to write, build, or rehearse. But now they want full credit, equal share, same grade as the rest of you. You sit with that, frustrated, and ask yourself, do I let it slide or speak up? First, it's tempting to say nothing. The work is over. You want to move on. Calling it out might cause conflict. You tell yourself it's just one assignment. Maybe it won't matter much in the long run. But that excuse starts to feel thin, especially if this isn't the first time. Maybe they've done it in other classes too. Or maybe this is your first time dealing with a freeloader, and it just doesn't sit right. The issue isn't just effort. It's fairness. Everyone else carved time out of their schedules. Someone stayed up late to polish the presentation. Someone rewrote a paragraph 3 times to hit the word count. You edited slides, handled feedback, coordinated timelines. And this person, they skimmed the final file and said, "Looks good." That's not contribution. That's coasting. Group work is supposed to reflect collaboration. It's built on shared labor. But when someone doesn't do their part, it becomes a test of values. Not their values, yours. Because now you have to decide whether to reward an action or tell the truth. Before reporting anything, ask, did you set clear roles from the start? Did the group outline tasks, deadlines, and expectations? If you didn't, the lazy member might claim they didn't know what they were supposed to do. But if the tasks were clear and they still didn't engage, then the pattern speaks for itself. Missed meetings, ignored messages, excuses, silence. Some students try to cover for the weak link. We'll just pick up the slack. They hope it won't affect the grade. But that creates resentment. Everyone ends up doing more than their share while one person cruises to an easy A. That's not teamwork. That's exploitation. And if it becomes a habit, the system breaks. Future group projects suffer. Trust erodes. If your instructor asked for a group reflection or peer review, that's your moment to be honest. You don't have to be harsh. You just have to be accurate. You write, 3 members met regularly and divided tasks. 1 member was frequently absent and did not complete any agreed-upon assignments. You don't assign blame. You describe behavior. Some instructors adjust grades based on peer feedback. Others don't. But your job isn't to guarantee a penalty. It's to document the truth. If you don't say anything, you're silently saying their behavior was acceptable. And it wasn't. If your group didn't submit feedback forms, consider emailing the instructor. Keep it short and factual. I wanted to share some context about our group project. While most members contributed fully, 1 member did not participate in meetings or contribute to the written work. I wanted to document this for transparency. You're not asking for a specific punishment. You're providing information. What the instructor does with it is up to them. If you're worried about backlash, talk to your group first. See if others feel the same way. Often, you're not alone. If 3 out of 4 people say someone didn't help, the instructor is more likely to take it seriously. And it gives you support if things get tense later. Now let's consider the other side. What if the person had a reason? Maybe they were dealing with an illness, a family emergency, or mental health issues. That doesn't excuse total absence, but it might explain it. If that's the case, they should have communicated. Group work depends on honesty. If someone disappears without explanation and only shows up at the end, they've let the team down, no matter the reason. Still, if they later admit they were struggling, you can have empathy and still expect fairness. You can say, I understand things were hard, but it's not fair to expect the same grade without doing the work. If you'd told us earlier, we could have adjusted. You're not being cruel. You're being honest with boundaries. Sometimes the person who didn't contribute acts defensive. They say, I was part of the group. I helped with ideas. Or, I didn't do as much, but I tried. They might guilt trip you. They might say, why are you making a big deal out of this? But effort isn't enough if there's no output. Trying without producing is different from showing up and working. And the rest of you did both. In some cases, the person might even pressure the group to cover for them. Can you just say we all contributed? That's when you need to stay grounded. The truth doesn't change because someone asks you to lie. If they wanted equal credit, they should have done equal work. What happens next depends on your instructor. Some will dock points. Some will require a redo. Others might do nothing. But you've done your part. You stood up for fairness. You told the truth. And that matters not just for the grade, but for your own standards. Over time, these decisions shape how people work with you. If you're known as someone who carries the team and stays silent, people will take advantage. But if you're known as someone who expects shared effort and speaks up when things go wrong, you'll attract better collaborators. Group work teaches more than content. It teaches how to manage uneven effort, conflict, and responsibility. And when someone tries to ride the wave without paddling, your response shows who you are. Not petty, not vindictive, just clear. You don't have to make it personal. You don't have to escalate it. You just have to tell the truth, even when it's awkward. That's how good teams stay fair. That's how honest work gets recognized. And that's how you make sure the next time the group knows everyone has to show up. A student walks into your office after class. Their hands are tight in their lap. Their voice is low. They look you in the eye and say, "I cheated on the last exam." They don't make excuses. They don't try to dodge the truth. They just say it straight. They look ashamed, but also relieved. They've been holding it in. They want to come clean. Now the weight is in your hands. Do you report them, or does their honesty earn them a second chance? On one side, you feel a kind of respect. Most students who cheat don't admit it. They wait to see if they're caught. If they get away with it, they move on. But this student didn't wait. They owned up to it. They chose integrity after the fact, yes, but still. That counts for something. It's rare. And it means they're not beyond repair. But the other side comes fast. They still cheated. They violated academic rules. They got an unfair advantage. While others studied, they cut corners. And whether they confessed or not, the damage was done. If they benefited from cheating, even briefly, it affects the integrity of the grading process. That matters not just for them, but for everyone. Your job isn't just to support students. It's also to uphold standards. If cheating goes unpunished, it weakens the entire system. Others may think they can get away with it too. Worse, students who follow the rules may feel betrayed. They stayed up studying, memorizing, revising. They followed the process. And now someone who didn't get a pass? That's where the tension lives. You're balancing honesty and accountability. And the truth is, they don't cancel each other out. Honesty doesn't erase what was done, but it can change how you respond. You start with policy. What does your school require? Most institutions have clear rules about academic misconduct. Cheating is typically a reportable offense. Even if a student confesses, instructors are usually required to document it. Some policies give instructors discretion, especially for first-time offenses. Others don't. Knowing the rules helps you make a decision you can defend. If the policy requires reporting, then the next step is formal. You document the incident. You submit it to the Academic Integrity Office or relevant committee. You include the student's confession. You make it clear that they came forward on their own. That detail matters. It doesn't erase the cheating, but it can shape the outcome. Some systems offer lighter penalties for students who self-report. Maybe a 0 on the assignment instead of failing the course, or a warning instead of probation. If you have discretion, you think through what the goal is. Are you trying to punish or to teach? If this is a student who has never cheated before, who took the risk of admitting their mistake without being caught, there may be a way to hold them accountable without crushing them. You can assign a 0 on the test. You can require a make-up assignment under supervision. You can make them write a reflection about why academic integrity matters. These are consequences, not escapes. But you don't ignore the behavior. You don't let it slide. Because even a confessed cheat is still a cheat. Ignoring it sends the message that consequences are optional if you feel guilty enough. And that's not how trust works. Integrity isn't just about telling the truth. It's about honoring rules even when no one's looking. Now think about what this teaches the student. If you sweep it under the rug, they may feel relieved. But they don't learn the full weight of what they did. They may see confession as a shortcut around discipline. But if you take them seriously, if you say, "Thank you for being honest. That was brave," but there still has to be a consequence. They hear something stronger. They hear that honesty matters, but it doesn't undo dishonesty. That kind of response doesn't just correct. It builds character. It tells the student, you made a mistake, you owned it, now here's how you fix it. That moment becomes part of their growth. They learn that courage isn't just confessing, it's accepting the result. And then there's the broader impact. If students know they can confess and still face consequences with fairness, not fury, they might be more willing to come forward when they mess up. It creates a culture where integrity isn't about perfection, but accountability. You're not trying to catch people, you're trying to guide them. You can also use the moment to reflect on your own teaching. Why did the student cheat? Were they overwhelmed? Confused? Did they feel they had no other choice? Cheating is always the student's responsibility, but understanding the pressure points can help you improve the system. Maybe the timeline was too tight. Maybe the instructions were unclear. Maybe the stakes felt too high. You don't use that as an excuse, but as insight. You also follow up. After the process is done, after the report, the meeting, the outcome, you check in. Not to scold, just to say, you made a hard decision and you're still here. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. You give them support, not sympathy. You keep the door open for growth. Because at the core of education is trust. You trust students to learn. They trust you to guide them. Cheating breaks that, but confession, real confession, can start to rebuild it. So you do report it, or you document it, or you apply a consequence that fits the offense. You don't destroy the student. You don't label them forever, but you do respond, because silence helps no one. Not them, not you, not the class. And in the end, you hope they remember this not as the time they got caught, but as the time they were taken seriously, held accountable, treated fairly, and given a chance to do better. You're sitting across from your client in a windowless room. They've just told you the truth. They didn't do it. You believe them. Every word lines up. Their story holds. But the evidence outside that room paints a different picture. Fingerprints, a shaky witness, and a trail that points straight at them. You know this person is innocent, but proving it will be nearly impossible. And the longer you stare at the file, the more one thought starts to creep in. If you broke confidentiality and told someone what you know, they might walk free. You feel the pressure in your chest. As a defense lawyer, your role is clear. Protect the client. Uphold attorney-client privilege. This isn't just a tradition. It's a cornerstone of justice. The system only works if clients can speak freely with their lawyer, knowing that what they say won't be repeated without permission. If that trust breaks, the whole system collapses. People stop telling the truth. Lawyers can't defend effectively. Innocent people stop getting a fair shot. But what if staying silent costs your client their freedom? Maybe you know about an alibi they're afraid to use. Maybe they gave you a lead that, if shared, would unravel the prosecution's case. Maybe they told you something off the record that would clear everything up, but only if it came out publicly. And you can't share it because they told you in confidence. The rules are strict. Confidentiality isn't a suggestion. It's a binding duty. Unless your client gives you informed consent, you can't break it. Not to the police, not to the judge, not to anyone. The only exceptions are narrow. If your client tells you they're about to commit a new crime, especially one that could harm someone, then you may have an obligation to report it. But knowing they're innocent, that's not a legal exception. So you don't break confidentiality. You can't. But you don't stop working either. You go after every possible angle. You investigate every thread they give you. If they mention a person who can verify where they were, you find that person. If they tell you a detail that casts doubt on the timeline, you dig into it. You do everything the law allows to turn their private truth into a public defense, without violating the rules. Let's say your client tells you they were at another location during the crime. They beg you not to share it because it would expose someone else, maybe a friend they were helping illegally, or a family member they don't want involved. You ask again. If I can prove you were there, you might be acquitted, but I need permission to use it. They say no. Now you're stuck. You keep pushing. You explain the stakes. If I don't raise this, the jury will only see the bad evidence. You'll be convicted for something you didn't do. You try to convince them, not forcefully but clearly, that protecting someone else isn't worth trading their freedom. If they still say no, you stay silent. You don't leak it. You don't hint at it. If you do and it's traced back, your license is at risk. The client could sue you. Worse, future clients would know they can't trust their lawyer. That damage doesn't stay in one case, it spreads through the system. Now consider a harder twist. What if someone else confesses to you? A third party says, "I'm the one who did it, not your client." But they don't want to go public. They don't want you to use their confession. They just wanted to get it off their chest. You can't use it, not unless they agree. Even if it proves your client's innocence, your hands are tied. There are paths forward, but they're narrow. You can try to persuade the confessor to testify. You can bring in an investigator to find independent evidence that leads to the same truth. But you can't disclose that confession unless the person waives privilege or tells someone else. Every move you make has to stay inside the rules. That's frustrating. It can feel like the law protects the wrong people. But that same structure is what lets innocent people win, even when the world thinks they're guilty. The rules force the system to rely on evidence, not suspicion. On truth, not shortcuts. Still, you don't give up. You build the best case you can. You cross-examine the state's witnesses. You expose inconsistencies. You highlight what the evidence doesn't explain. You ask questions that plant reasonable doubt. You give the jury a chance to see past the surface. And behind closed doors, you keep working with your client. You revisit the facts. You walk through the story again and again. You look for gaps that can be filled without breaking their trust. You ask them to reconsider sharing what they told you in private. Some clients change their mind. Some never do. But you don't push them beyond what's ethical. You live with the pressure. Some nights it eats at you. You imagine the verdict. You imagine your client's face if it's guilty. And you wonder if staying silent made you complicit. But you remind yourself your job isn't to fix the whole system. It's to follow it and fight within it. You're not a judge. You're not the police. You're the defense. That role matters. Because if every lawyer bent the rules for a greater good, there would be no protection for anyone. Innocent people would still lose. The guilty would get off easier. And no one would know who to trust. So you stay in the fight. You don't leak. You don't bend. But you dig. You challenge. You defend. Because the truth doesn't need shortcuts. It needs persistence. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to win. You're sitting across from your client in a quiet interview room. The case is serious, maybe armed robbery, maybe assault, maybe something worse. The prosecution has evidence, but it's not airtight. The client leans in, drops their eyes and says, "I did it." They don't say it with pride. They're not gloating, but they say it clearly. They're guilty. And now, you sit still. You ask follow-up questions. Not because you doubt them, but because every detail matters. How did it happen? Why? Who else was involved? What happened before and after? As they talk, your role becomes clearer, not easier, but clearer. You are their defense attorney. Your duty is not to judge. Your job is not to punish. Your role is to protect their rights and ensure they get a fair trial. You still defend them fully. That doesn't mean lying. That doesn't mean tricking the court. It means holding the prosecution to its burden. In every criminal case, the burden of proof is on the state. They have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That principle exists for a reason. People are not convicted because they seem guilty. They're convicted because evidence proves it clearly, publicly, and according to law. Knowing your client is guilty changes the approach. But it doesn't end the defense. In fact, it sharpens it. It forces you to focus on process, on fairness, and on the limits of what the prosecution can claim. You no longer build a case around innocence. Instead, you look at how the state is presenting theirs. You examine the evidence. Was the search legal? Were the witnesses credible? Was the lineup flawed? You check every step. If the arrest was unlawful, you file a motion to suppress. If the confession was coerced, you challenge it. If the evidence chain was broken, you highlight it. This isn't a technical game. These rules exist to keep the system honest. If shortcuts were taken, they need to be exposed. You also protect your client from self-incrimination. If they confess to you privately, That confession is protected by attorney-client privilege. You can't reveal it. You can't let it shape your argument in a way that exposes them. That's the rule. You don't get to break it just because you feel uncomfortable. But you also can't let your client lie on the stand. If they choose to testify and you know they're about to say something false, you face a hard ethical wall. You can't coach perjury. You can't present false testimony. That crosses the line from defense to fraud. So if they insist on testifying, and you know it will include lies, you may have to take steps, like withdrawing from the case or informing the court in limited terms, depending on your jurisdiction's rules. Most defense lawyers, when faced with a private confession, shift strategy. They don't try to prove innocence. They challenge the government's case. They make sure the trial is fair. If conviction is likely, they prepare for sentencing. They gather context, background, trauma, mental health circumstances. They work to present the client as more than the charge. They push for a lighter sentence, rehabilitation, or a chance at redemption. Sometimes you negotiate. You talk to the prosecutor about a plea deal. Your client admits guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. You guide them through the risks. If they plead, they give up the right to trial. If they go to trial and lose, the sentence may be worse. That choice is theirs, but your job is to make sure they understand it. Let's take an example. Your client is accused of burglary. The police found stolen items in their home. The case isn't perfect, no eyewitnesses, no security footage. But then the client tells you, "I broke in. I took the stuff." That changes your path. You don't argue, "He didn't do it," but you do question the search. Was the warrant valid? Did the officers follow procedure? If not, the evidence might be thrown out. That could change the outcome, not because your client is innocent, but because the state didn't do its job right. Another example. A client charged with assault confesses to hitting someone during a fight, but they tell you they were provoked, scared, defending themselves. Now you shift to a self-defense strategy. Guilt in a legal sense isn't just about the act. It's about the intent, the context, the legality of the action. A confession doesn't erase that. Every defense attorney at some point hears a confession. It might come early or halfway through trial, and each time, the response must be the same. Stay within the rules, protect the client, and work the case with integrity. The public often misunderstands this. They think defending a guilty person is immoral, but the opposite is true. The system isn't just for the innocent, it's for everyone. If you only defend people who might be innocent, you abandon the core of justice. You also remind yourself, not every confession is complete. Sometimes clients confess because they feel hopeless, or pressured, or confused. They may leave things out. They may overstate guilt. Your job isn't to take every word as final truth. It's to look at the full picture, inside and out. Confession isn't conviction. You keep going. You challenge bad evidence. You hold the court to its rules. You make sure the jury sees a full picture. And if the time comes for sentencing, you fight for the fairest one possible. You explain your client's background. You show that they're more than a mistake. You remind the court that even guilty people deserve to be treated as human beings. That's the job. Not to get people off the hook. Not to game the system, but to stand beside a person, guilty or not, and make sure their rights are protected, their case is tested, and their life isn't reduced to a file number. You do that fully, because if you don't, the system breaks for everyone. The case is simple on paper. A teenager walked into a convenience store, slipped a pair of headphones into their jacket, and walked out without paying. Security caught it on camera. The manager called the police. The teen was arrested, booked, and now faces charges for shoplifting. It's a petty crime, low-dollar value, no violence, no damage. But the consequences aren't small. Now a prosecutor, judge, or school official has to decide. Do we punish this teen to send a message, or show leniency to avoid wrecking their future? This kind of case happens all the time. A small mistake, usually made in a moment of impulse, opens a door that's hard to close. On the surface, it looks like a teaching moment. But if handled poorly, it becomes a life-altering event. You start by asking, what's the goal? Is it punishment or correction? If the goal is to teach responsibility, harsh penalties can backfire. A criminal record for theft, even a minor one, can follow a teen for years. It can limit school opportunities, financial aid, and future jobs. Employers don't always check the dollar amount. They just see theft and move on. A petty mistake turns into a long-term wall. Some say punishment is necessary, that without it, teens won't learn, that letting it slide tells them rules don't matter, that society needs to draw lines, and crossing them must have consequences. There's truth in that. If a teen shoplifts and nothing happens, they may think it's no big deal. If their peers see them get away with it, it might spread. The fear is real. Make it easy to ignore petty crime and it grows. But punishment doesn't have to mean harshness. It can mean clarity, structure, and accountability. There's a difference between letting someone off and guiding them through a consequence that teaches instead of destroys. That's why many courts use diversion programs for minors. Instead of jail or a formal charge, the teen enters a program that includes counseling, community service, and sometimes restitution. They meet with mentors or social workers. They write apology letters. They attend workshops about theft and its impact. If they complete the program, the charge is dropped. No record, no label, just a second chance. This approach isn't soft. It demands effort. It requires the teen to face what they did, reflect on it, and correct it. But it gives them a path forward. And it shows that the system sees them as more than the crime. It sees a kid who made a poor decision, not a criminal in the making. Now think about the teen. Maybe they're 14, maybe 17. Maybe they've never been in trouble before. Maybe their home life is unstable. Maybe they're angry, anxious, or trying to fit in. Teens don't always have the impulse control adults expect. Their brains are still developing, especially the parts tied to judgment and risk. That's not an excuse, but it is context. And context matters. Let's say the teen has never been in trouble before. Their grades are average. Their friends are decent. They shoplifted because they wanted something they couldn't afford or to impress someone. You talk to them. They're embarrassed. They admit it. They don't argue. In that case, a formal charge helps no one. They already know they messed up. What they need is direction, not detention. But what if this isn't their first offense? What if they've been caught stealing before, at school, at a mall, from a neighbor? What if they're starting to spiral? That changes things. Now, leniency alone may not be enough. You still don't want to wreck their life, but the consequences need to be sharper. Maybe probation with strict conditions. Maybe counseling that goes deeper. Maybe closer supervision from the school or family. You escalate support and structure without slamming the door on their future. That's where tailored responses matter. Not every case needs the same outcome. You look at the pattern, the behavior, and the person behind it. One teen needs a warning and guidance. Another may need structured intervention. But neither needs a jail cell to learn better judgment. Now think about the store owner. They lost money. They feel violated. Maybe they're tired of being stolen from. Maybe this teen was polite but walked out with merchandise anyway. It's fair to expect accountability. That's where restorative justice comes in. In some programs, the teen meets the victim. They hear how the theft affected them. They say what led to the choice. They work to repair the harm. That process can be more powerful than a court hearing. It humanizes both sides. You also have to consider race, class, and bias. Studies show teens of color are more likely to face arrest, charges, and harsher punishment for the same offenses. Poor kids often don't have access to legal representation that can push for diversion. That's why automatic punishment can be dangerous. It magnifies inequality. A system built for fairness can't ignore how unevenly it applies its rules. So you build responses that are smart, not just strict. You use every tool: diversion, mentoring, service, structure. You hold the teen accountable without branding them forever. You protect society not by locking kids away, but by turning them toward better paths. If the teen responds well, it ends there. They learn, they grow. They remember the moment not as a ruin, but as a wake-up call. If they don't respond, if they repeat the behavior, then the consequences escalate. But now the system has a record of trying to help. and that effort matters. Punishment has a place, but it's not the only option, and it's not the best one for every teen. In cases of petty crime, leniency, when combined with responsibility, can be more effective than severity. It doesn't mean ignoring the wrong. It means responding in a way that's focused on change, not just blame. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to punish teenagers. It's to help them become adults who no longer need punishment. You're walking down a hallway, maybe at school, maybe at work, maybe just passing through a public space. You're not trying to eavesdrop, but you hear something. Two people are talking low and fast. One of them says, "All I have to do is say they did it. Nobody will question me." The other nods or laughs or urges caution. But the message is clear. They're planning to accuse someone falsely. Maybe it's for revenge. Maybe it's a power play. Maybe it's just a way to shift blame. Either way, they're not talking about truth. They're talking about control. You stop. You're not sure what to do. You weren't part of the conversation. You weren't invited to hear it. Maybe they didn't even notice you. But now the information is yours. You know someone is about to get blamed for something they didn't do. And you have a choice. Stay silent or intervene. The instinct to walk away is strong. It's not your fight. You don't know the people involved. Maybe you didn't hear it right. Maybe they were joking. Maybe the accusation won't stick. You can't fix everything. You don't want to create trouble for yourself. That line of thinking is common and dangerous. False accusations can destroy lives. They can ruin reputations, jobs, friendships, even mental health. Depending on the claim, they can lead to arrests, expulsions, lawsuits. And once an accusation is out, even disproving it doesn't always fix the damage. People remember headlines, not retractions. And the person being accused may live with suspicion long after they've been cleared. So the stakes are high, but so is the risk of intervening. You could become a target. The person planning the lie might turn on you. They might claim you misunderstood, or they might accuse you next. That's real. That fear is real. But so is the cost of silence. You start by considering the context. Do you know the people involved? If so, you may have more power than you think. If you're a peer, a friend, a colleague, or someone with a voice they'll listen to, you can step in early. You can say, "I heard what you said. Don't go through with that. It's not right." You don't need to threaten. You don't need to yell. Just name what's happening. Sometimes just being seen is enough to make someone back down. But if you don't know them, or if the situation feels hostile, you need to think carefully. You still have options, but you may need backup. If you're in a school, go to a counselor, teacher, or administrator. Tell them what you heard. Stick to the facts. I overheard 2 students planning to falsely accuse someone. They said it clearly. "I don't know the full story, but I think someone should know." You don't need to take sides. You're reporting a risk. Let the adults follow up. If you're in a workplace, go to HR or your supervisor. I overheard something concerning. 2 coworkers were discussing a plan to make a false complaint about someone. I thought you should be aware before anything happens. Keep it short and clear. Again, you're not accusing. You're alerting. If it happens in a public setting like a cafe, a park, or a train, and you don't know where to go, write it down. Note the time, place, what was said, and any identifying details. If the false accusation actually happens, you'll have a record to offer. That may be the only thing that protects the innocent person from being believed without question. Now imagine the accusation goes through. The person is called in, questioned, suspended, judged. They say, "I didn't do it," but nobody listens because someone said they did. And in today's world, that's often enough. One person's claim can outweigh silence. That's why your voice, your truth, can matter more than you realize. If you saw a crime happening, you'd report it. If you saw someone being bullied, you'd step in. A false accusation is its own kind of violence. It uses the system against someone unfairly. It turns justice into a weapon. And when you see that weapon being loaded, you have a moral obligation to do something. Doing nothing doesn't keep you neutral. It makes you complicit. That's a hard truth, but it's real. When someone is falsely accused, they often stand alone. Their best hope is that someone speaks up, someone who heard something, someone who knows it wasn't true, that someone could be you. Now let's talk about doubt. What if you misheard? What if it wasn't a plan, just a bad joke or an exaggeration? That happens. You still report it, but carefully. I heard something that might have been serious, and I'm not sure. I want someone else to look into it. You're not convicting anyone. You're asking someone to verify. That's responsible. That's fair. And what if the accusation never comes? What if they talked about it but didn't go through with it? You still did the right thing, because your action might have been the reason they backed down. Or it might have shown that lies don't go unnoticed. Either way, your voice made the room less dangerous. You may also face pushback. Some people might say, mind your own business, but that advice only helps the people doing harm. Truth doesn't thrive in silence. It needs people willing to speak when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, when it's not their problem until it is. In some cases, you can also protect the person being targeted. If you know who the intended victim is, you can warn them. I heard someone planning to accuse you of something that isn't true. I don't know why. Be careful. That gives them a chance to prepare, to gather their own evidence, to speak up before the lie lands. But do this only if it's safe, and only if you're sure of what you heard. False accusations are rare, but when they happen, they cut deep. They damage not just the person accused, but everyone who trusted the system. Your role in that moment isn't to fix everything. It's to keep the truth from being buried. You don't need to be a hero. You don't need to confront anyone publicly. You just need to act quietly, clearly, early, because silence is easy, but justice is not. And if you're in the room when a lie is born, your decision may be the only thing standing between someone's dignity and someone else's deceit. You're called in for jury duty. You sit in the box while the lawyers ask questions. They're trying to find out who you are, how you think, and whether you can be fair. First, it feels like routine. You answer politely. You say you understand the process. You promise to be impartial. But then comes a case that touches something personal, an issue, a memory, a belief that you know will shape how you see the evidence. Maybe it's a charge involving domestic violence, and someone close to you was a victim. Maybe it's a drug offense, and you've lost someone to addiction. Maybe it's a corporate fraud case, and you've always distrusted people in suits. You feel something tighten inside. You know you can't see this case with clean eyes. Now the question is simple. Do you speak up and remove yourself, or stay silent and serve? You feel the pressure. Serving on a jury is a civic duty. You want to do your part. Maybe you waited all day to be called, and now that you're here, walking away feels like failure, or worse, like avoiding responsibility. You think, maybe I can set my bias aside. Maybe I can be objective, even if something about this case feels too close. Maybe, but deep down, you know better. You know that when the trial starts, you'll carry that bias into the room. Even if you don't mean to, even if you try hard not to. Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a feeling that one witness seems more trustworthy, or that one side is probably wrong. That whisper doesn't go away just because you want it to. The justice system depends on fairness. A jury isn't supposed to be perfect, but it's supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to weigh the facts without personal baggage. If you're sitting there knowing you can't do that, staying quiet isn't just a small mistake. It's a breach of the process, and it puts someone's future at risk. You might tell yourself that your bias isn't serious, that everyone has some kind of opinion. That's true. No one walks into the courtroom without a worldview. But there's a difference between general experience and specific prejudice. If the case brings out something emotional or fixed in you, something that pulls you toward one side before any evidence is shown, that's not just a viewpoint. That's a tilt. And tilted juries don't deliver justice. They deliver outcomes shaped by feeling, not fact. Let's say you stay silent. The trial begins. As the testimony unfolds, your bias starts to guide your attention. You listen harder when one side speaks. You doubt more when the other side presents. Maybe you catch yourself thinking, of course they'd say that, not because of the evidence, but because you already decided what people like them are like. You might even feel justified. You think your instincts are sharp, that you know how these cases usually go. That's the danger. Bias rarely feels wrong when you're in it. It feels like certainty, and certainty in a jury room can be loud. You might speak with confidence that sways others. You might push back against someone trying to see another angle. And if your bias is hidden, if the others don't know you're carrying something personal, your voice may carry more weight than it should. Now think about the defendant. They don't know your story. They don't know your internal conflict. They're sitting there hoping that the people judging them are listening with open minds, not with grudges, not with trauma, not with political opinions disguised as logic. Just facts. That's what the system promises. If you can't give them that, you shouldn't be in that room. Some people stay silent because they think the case is too important to leave. They want to be the one who ensures the right verdict. That's not how juries are supposed to work. You're not there to steer the outcome. You're there to listen, weigh, and decide fairly. If you already have the answer in your head, you're not deliberating. You're campaigning. Others stay silent because they think no one else will do the job right, that they're more thoughtful, more careful, more capable. That may be true, but if you're thoughtful enough to see your bias, then you're capable enough to know that stepping aside is sometimes the most responsible thing you can do. It's not a weakness, it's integrity, and the system has space for that. Voir dire, the jury selection process is built to catch this. When the lawyers ask if you can be impartial, that's the time to speak. You don't need to share your whole story. You don't need to confess every detail. You just need to say, "This case involves issues I've had personal experiences with, and I don't think I can be completely neutral." That's enough. You'll be thanked, excused, and replaced. No shame, no penalty. You might wonder, what if everyone claimed bias to avoid serving? That doesn't happen. Most people are willing to serve. Most people take the role seriously. And those who speak up about bias often do so because they respect the process, not because they're trying to escape it. And yes, some people fake bias to avoid serving. That's different. That's dishonest. You're not doing that. You're naming a real obstacle to fairness. That's what the system needs. Jurors who care enough to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. So you recuse yourself. You step out. You let someone else take the seat. Someone who can hear the case with fresh ears. You don't walk away from your duty. You fulfill it. Because serving fairly doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means stepping back so the system can do what it was designed to do. Deliver justice with a clear mind and a steady hand. A camera watches a street corner 24 hours a day. Most people passing by don't notice it. Some know it's there and don't care. Others glance up and feel uneasy. The government says the camera helps reduce crime, and in some ways it does. Police can use the footage to track suspects, solve thefts, or stop violence before it escalates. That sounds like safety, but the camera doesn't just see criminals. It sees everyone. People walking to work, couples arguing, kids playing, someone protesting quietly. All of it becomes data, and the real question starts to grow. Is it okay for the government to watch everyone just to stop a few? Surveillance is always sold as protection. Cities install cameras to reduce theft. Agencies monitor online activity to prevent terrorism. Officials track phones to locate people in emergencies. Each action has a reason, and many people accept it, thinking, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. That idea feels simple, but it skips over the cost. Being watched changes how people behave. Even if you've done nothing wrong, knowing a camera or algorithm is tracking you can make you act differently. You might not speak freely. You might avoid places or people you fear might draw attention. That's not paranoia. That's pressure. When every move becomes a data point, privacy shrinks. And when privacy shrinks, freedom follows. Not all surveillance is equal. Some methods are targeted, used with a warrant for a specific person under suspicion. That's lawful and it respects due process. But broad surveillance watches everyone all the time. Traffic cameras, license plate readers, public space drones, data collected from phones or social media without asking. These systems don't wait for suspicion. They collect first, sort later. That's where the problem starts. Imagine walking into a library and looking at a book on religion or war or protest movements. You check it out. A week later, you attend a public rally. Nothing illegal, just peaceful gathering. But now your name is in a database. Your movements match a pattern. An algorithm flags you, not because you did something wrong, but because the system sees your behavior as interesting. Maybe you're now on a list. Maybe you'll be watched more closely next time. You wouldn't even know. That's not fiction. That's how predictive policing and data surveillance systems work in many places. They use software to find patterns in behavior, but patterns don't prove guilt. They just suggest risk. And risk is a blurry line. When governments rely on algorithms to guide law enforcement, they sometimes follow bias. If the software is trained on flawed data, it replicates that flaw. That means people from over-policed neighborhoods, often black or poor, get flagged more often, not because they're doing more wrong, but because they've been watched more already. Supporters of surveillance say the trade-off is worth it. They point to crimes stopped, suspects caught, threats identified. They say it's about balance. Sacrifice a little privacy, gain more safety. But the line keeps moving. First, it's just street cameras. Then it's face recognition. Then it's location tracking. Then it's monitoring what people post or say online. Suddenly, it's not a small trade-off. It's a shift in power. A government that knows where you go, who you meet, what you search, and what you say can shape behavior even without passing laws. It doesn't have to punish you. It only needs to make you nervous. That's how control works. Not always through force, often through quiet observation. Look at other countries. In China, the government runs a massive surveillance network. Millions of cameras, facial recognition, real-time location tracking. The system connects to a social credit score where behavior affects access to travel, housing, or jobs. Citizens know they're watched, and that knowledge shapes what they say and do, creates order, but not freedom. Some say, that won't happen here. But once the tools exist, the temptation to use them grows. What begins as crime prevention can shift toward control. During protests or political unrest, surveillance systems can identify demonstrators, track them, question them later. The law may allow protest, but the watching creates fear. That fear discourages action. That's how rights erode, not in loud moments, but in quiet pressure. Others argue that private companies already collect far more data than the government. That's true. Your phone, your apps, your social media all track you. But that doesn't make government surveillance harmless. In fact, when public and private data systems merge, the problem gets worse. Some law enforcement agencies buy location data from companies that harvest it from apps. They don't need a warrant. They just pay for it. That's surveillance through the back door. Now consider false positives. Surveillance doesn't just target guilty people. It sometimes gets it wrong. Face recognition software has misidentified suspects, especially people of color. Innocent people have been arrested, questioned, or denied entry based on errors. Once your name is in a system, it can be hard to remove. That's not just unfair. That's dangerous. People deserve safety. But safety without freedom isn't real protection. The challenge isn't choosing between privacy and crime prevention. It's building systems that respect both. That means requiring warrants for invasive surveillance. It means transparency, knowing what data is collected, how it's stored, who sees it, and when it gets deleted. It means checks and balances, courts, oversight boards, independent reviews. And most of all, it means listening to the people who are watched the most. The government works for the people, not the other way around. And people deserve to walk through streets, use their phones, and speak their minds without wondering if a camera or algorithm is watching every move. Surveillance may reduce some crimes, but unchecked, it creates a new kind of threat, one that doesn't steal your wallet but your autonomy. The question isn't whether the government can watch you. It's whether you get to know when, why, and how, and whether the price of that watchful eye is your right to live without being seen. A self-driving car speeds down a two-lane street. It's raining. Visibility is low. Suddenly, a person stumbles into the road. There's no time to brake fully. The car has two options: veer sharply into a wall, risking serious harm or death to its passenger, or keep going straight and hit the pedestrian. There's no third path, no escape route, just a decision the car must make in a split second. And the choice reveals more than just engineering. It shows what kind of values we are willing to program into machines. This is not just theory. As autonomous vehicles become more common, their programming has to account for rare but real moments like this. Human drivers make decisions based on instinct, emotion, and split-second judgment. But machines need rules, algorithms, priorities built into lines of code. And once a car is in motion without human hands on the wheel, those rules take over. At first glance, the problem looks like a version of the classic trolley dilemma. One person versus another. Save the driver or save the pedestrian. But it's more than that, because behind each option is a different moral belief about responsibility, risk, and who counts more in a moment of crisis. One argument says the car should protect its passenger at all costs. That's the person who bought the car, who trusted it to drive. The machine was designed to serve the rider. If a human were driving, they might instinctively swerve away from danger, even if it put others at risk. So the car should mimic that. It should act in the interest of its occupant, even if it means harming someone outside the vehicle. That seems harsh, but it follows a certain logic. The car is an extension of the passenger's choices. But this view runs into trouble fast, because it creates a world where pedestrians are always at a disadvantage. If self-driving cars are built to prioritize their riders, then everyone outside the car becomes less safe. Walkers, cyclists, and bystanders would all live under the shadow of machines that won't stop for them if stopping means endangering someone inside. That's not just a moral concern, it's a public safety one. The other side argues that the car should minimize overall harm. If the pedestrian is likely to die and the passenger might survive a crash, the car should sacrifice the passenger. That's a utilitarian view. It says the value of one life is not greater just because they're inside the vehicle. It also tries to prevent a world where cars dominate the roads simply because they protect themselves better. That idea makes sense in a vacuum, but it has real consequences. If people know their self-driving car could decide to kill them to save someone else, will they buy it? Probably not. And without public trust, the technology fails. People won't adopt machines that treat them as expendable. So manufacturers have to walk a line between doing what's morally ideal and what consumers are willing to accept. Some suggest transparency as a solution. Let buyers choose the ethical setting of their car. Set a default, but allow people to adjust the programming, protect passenger, minimize total harm, or random selection in unavoidable crashes. That idea sounds democratic. It gives people control, but it also leads to chaos. If some cars are programmed to sacrifice passengers and others aren't, the rules of the road start to break down. Behavior becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is the enemy of safety. Others propose a universal standard, one ethical rule that applies to all autonomous vehicles, built into regulation. That would bring consistency, but it would also require global agreement on what that rule should be. And getting governments, manufacturers, ethicists, and the public to agree on a single moral principle is no easy task. There's also the question of context. What if the pedestrian broke the law, jaywalking in the dark, running across the road while distracted? Should that matter? Some say yes. If someone creates the hazard, they assume more of the risk. But machines aren't judges. They can't weigh guilt and innocence in real time. They can only assess probabilities, speed, distance, angles of impact. Any rule that tries to evaluate behavior on the fly risks error. Imagine another case. A child runs into the street chasing a ball. The car can't stop in time. Swerving means hitting a tree. The passenger might die. The child might die. The algorithm has to pick. If it's programmed to prioritize youth, it saves the child. If it follows rider protection, it saves the adult. No choice is neutral. Each one encodes a value. These edge cases are rare. Most autonomous vehicles will spend millions of miles without facing a moment like this. But when it happens, the consequences are irreversible. That's why the rules must be clear before the car ever leaves the factory. Manufacturers often avoid making these decisions public. They focus on improving safety so that such choices are never needed. But perfection is impossible. There will always be edge cases. And if the company refuses to say how the car will choose, then the decision is left to the machine with no accountability. Ethics aside, there's also law. In most countries, the law doesn't yet say how a self-driving car should act in a life-and-death moment. Courts haven't ruled on whether sacrificing a rider to save a pedestrian is acceptable or required. But as soon as the first fatal incident occurs, those cases will come. And the legal system will have to answer the question engineers and ethicists have wrestled with for years. Meanwhile, developers have to make choices. Some use risk models, calculate which path has the least chance of death based on known data. Others build in hard constraints. Never hit a pedestrian if it can be avoided, no matter what. But all these systems depend on sensors, maps, and real-time data. And in the end, they depend on one decision: what kind of value to put into the machine. Because that's what this is about. Not just logic, not just code, but values. What kind of world we want to live in. A world where machines protect us above all, or one where the greater good sometimes asks for sacrifice. Neither answer is easy, but the machines will need one, and we have to give it to them before they're forced to choose on their own. You're scrolling through your phone when a video catches your attention. It looks like a well-known person, maybe a teacher, a classmate, a coworker, or even a public figure saying or doing something disturbing. First, it feels real. The voice matches. The face moves naturally. The lighting and settings seem right. But then something feels off. Maybe it's the blinking, or the timing of the words, or just a gut feeling. You watch again, this time with more attention. Then you notice the signs. It's not real. It's a deepfake. A deepfake is an artificial video built with machine learning that replaces someone's face or voice with another. It's getting harder to detect, especially at first glance. Some deepfakes are harmless, used for entertainment, parody, or satire, but others are not. The one you've just seen is in the second category. It's being used to smear someone. Maybe it shows them in a criminal act. Maybe it includes inappropriate content. Maybe it features hateful speech. Either way, it's designed to ruin their name, their job, or their safety. And now the question sits in front of you. Do you report it? Start with what you know. The video is fake. You've verified that either through research, digital analysis, or just clear visual inconsistencies. And the damage is real. It's spreading. People are sharing it, commenting on it, calling the person a liar, a threat, a monster. You see classmates whispering, co-workers joking, strangers tagging the person's account and posting threats. That's not a joke. That's a digital assault. Reporting it feels like the right thing to do, but you hesitate. What if no one listens? What if the person behind the video finds out and targets you? What if people accuse you of overreacting? Those are fair fears, but letting the video spread without saying anything is worse. Silence becomes protection not for the victim but for the creator, and falsehood grows faster in silence than in noise. You start by documenting. Save the link, take screenshots, record the date, the platform, the account posting it. That way, if it's deleted later, you still have evidence. Don't try to confront the poster yourself. Don't message them or threaten to expose them. That only invites retaliation, and it gives them time to cover their tracks. Next, report it through the platform's built-in system. Most social media sites, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, have rules against manipulated content, especially if it harms someone. Use the flag or report button. Select the option that fits: harmful false information, harassment, or defamation. Include a clear description. This video is a deepfake being used to spread false accusations against a real person. If the platform takes action quickly, the video may be taken down. But that's not always enough. Deepfakes spread fast. They get downloaded, re-uploaded, shared in group chats, and mirrored across platforms. So your next step is to notify the person being targeted. This part matters. If you know them personally, reach out gently. Say, "There's a video going around that isn't real. I wanted you to know, in case you haven't seen it." Don't dramatize it. Don't assume they've seen it already. And don't send the video unless they ask. Just let them know so they can decide what to do. If you don't know the person, look for contact details, public email, social media, or a school or workplace directory. Some people create anonymous tip emails for situations like this. If the person is a public figure, they may have a team. In that case, send a calm, factual message. A video is circulating that appears to be a deepfake. I believe it misrepresents a name and could cause harm. I thought it should be brought to your attention. You're not accusing, you're alerting. That difference is important. Once the target knows, they can take steps. Contacting a lawyer, filing a defamation claim, reaching out to the platform directly, or working with experts to debunk the video. But your tip gives them a head start. It helps them act before the damage becomes permanent. Some people think it's not their job to step in, that the person should handle it themselves. That's easy to say when it's not your name being dragged. But in a world where digital lies can spread faster than facts, the line between bystander and accomplice is thin. Choosing not to act isn't neutral, protects the lie. You might also consider alerting a teacher, manager, or school official, especially if the person targeted is underage or in a vulnerable position. Let them know what's happening and why it matters. There's a video targeting a student. It appears fake. It's causing reputational harm and needs to be addressed. Some institutions will act fast. Others will stall. But you've planted a flag. You've drawn attention to something that shouldn't be ignored. And sometimes that's enough to get things moving. If the video breaks the law, for example, if it includes non-consensual sexual content or incites violence, it should be reported to the police or a cybercrime unit. In some countries, deepfake laws are new but growing. Sending evidence to the right authority can trigger an investigation. Again, let the target lead that decision, but be ready to support it if they ask. Now step back. You've done what many people wouldn't. You've recognized a fake. You've acted. And you've done it without calling attention to yourself or putting anyone at further risk. What happens next might feel invisible. The video might get taken down quietly. The person might never know how you helped. The lie might die out without a final headline. That's okay. Reporting deepfakes isn't about credit. It's about damage control. Because deepfakes don't just distort pixels. They distort lives. They attack trust. They blur truth until people start believing nothing. And the only way to hold the line is to step in, even when no one asks you to. Even when the damage isn't yours. You saw a lie. You knew it could ruin someone. And you chose to do something. That's not just digital responsibility. That's human decency. And in a world full of manipulated noise, that matters more than ever. You're sitting in a conference room, reviewing the final prototype of the automation system your team has spent 2 years building. It's efficient, it's scalable, it works. With a single dashboard and some back-end support, it can do the work of hundreds of people. Tasks that once required coordination, scheduling, and physical labor now happen at the push of a button. Your client is excited. Costs will drop. Output will rise. The system is ready. But there's a question sitting under the celebration. Is this ethical? Automation is not new. Factories have been using machines for more than a century. Office software has replaced clerks, calculators, and filing cabinets. The pace has picked up, but the idea is the same: use technology to do what people used to do. The goal is efficiency. The reality is displacement. You look at the numbers. A warehouse that once employed 300 workers can now run with 50. A call center with 500 agents needs only a few supervisors and a chatbot interface. An accounting department with 40 bookkeepers is being trimmed down to 5 data auditors. That's not a projection. That's what your system enables. And it works well. But each improvement in speed comes at the cost of someone's job. The ethical question isn't whether the technology works. It's what happens to the people it replaces. They weren't lazy. They didn't underperform. They just became unnecessary. And now they face a future where their experience, sorting packages, answering phones, entering data, may not transfer to the next job, especially if the next job doesn't exist. Some argue that automation creates new roles. That's partly true. Someone has to build the machines, manage the systems, analyze the data. But those roles are fewer and more specialized. A line worker doesn't become a machine learning engineer overnight. A receptionist can't jump straight into Python scripts. The time it takes to retrain is long. The gap between being laid off and being rehired is wide. And for many, that gap becomes permanent. You think about where your system will go. Into cities where work is already scarce. Into towns where one employer supports an entire community. Into industries where labor is the last defense against full automation. You're not just replacing people. You're reshaping entire economies. That's the scale of the impact. And it's silent, because when people lose jobs to machines, they rarely make the news. There's no headline, just a layoff notice and a shrinking paycheck. You also consider who benefits. Your client saves money. Investors see higher margins. Customers get faster service. But the worker at the bottom sees nothing. They don't own stock. They don't get a bonus. Their reward is redundancy. And they're the ones who carried the system before it could run on its own. Now the ethical question sharpens. You're not responsible for every outcome, but you did build the system. You made the choice to design something that removes labor, not complements it. You wrote the code. You refined the interface. You tested it until it could run alone. That's power. And power requires responsibility. You might not be able to stop automation, but you can ask better questions while building it. Could the system be used to augment workers, not replace them? Could it handle dangerous or repetitive tasks while leaving creative or social roles to people? Could it include a training feature so that displaced workers have a real path forward? Not just theory, but actual transition into new roles? These aren't technical questions. They're ethical ones. Let's say you propose a retraining budget in the contract. A portion of the client's savings goes to support laid-off workers. That won't erase the impact, but it gives them a hand. Or maybe you design the interface with roles that require human oversight, jobs that current employees could learn with support. That makes the system a tool, not a replacement. But maybe the client doesn't want that. Maybe they want the highest efficiency, no strings attached. You're told, we're not in the business of managing feelings. We need results. That's when the ethical test gets real. Do you build what's requested, or do you push back? This is where a lot of developers look away. They say, it's just a tool. What people do with it isn't my responsibility. But that's not how ethics works. If you design a system that causes harm, even indirectly, you're part of the equation. You don't control every outcome, but you shape what's possible. And if your work pushes people out of the labor force without a plan, that's not neutral. That's a choice. There's also the issue of dignity. Work is more than income. It gives people identity, structure, and purpose. When a job disappears, something personal disappears with it. The paycheck matters, but so does the feeling of being needed. Automation, when done poorly, doesn't just remove effort, it removes value. It tells workers they're not just too slow, they're irrelevant. That's the deepest ethical risk, not the economic one, the human one. Because when enough people feel useless, social trust erodes. Resentment builds. People turn inward. Or worse, they turn on each other. We've seen it before. Economic shock leads to unrest. Automation doesn't cause it alone, but it can accelerate it, if no one takes responsibility for the human side of the machine. So what do? You keep building, but you do it with awareness. You talk to workers, not just executives. You ask who benefits and who loses. You build systems that leave room for people. You speak up when someone says, cut more labor. You design with dignity in mind, not because it's easy, because it's right. And if you reach the point where the harm outweighs the good, where you're asked to remove people without any plan for them, you walk away. Not in silence, but with clarity, because building smart systems isn't enough. They have to be fair too. And that's a choice only developers can make. before the code runs, before the job disappears, before the future becomes something no one wants to live in. You open an app. It welcomes you by name. It shows news stories you care about, ads that match your interests, products you almost bought but didn't. It knows what movies you like. It recommends restaurants in your area. It seems convenient, but behind that smooth experience is a silent transaction, your data for their service. The company didn't guess your preferences, collected them. Your clicks, your searches, your location, your messages, your browsing habits, even the time you spend looking at each photo. It built a profile, not just of what you do, but who you are, what you want, fear, avoid, and crave. And it did this not just to serve you better, but to keep you engaged longer. Because the more time you spend using the service, the more ads they can sell and the more money they make. Now the question appears, is this okay? If the data improves your experience, makes it smoother, faster, more relevant, does that justify the collection? Many people say yes. They argue that personalization is worth it, that data drives convenience. Without it, apps would be clunky, repetitive, and full of things you don't care about. Personalized feeds, music recommendations, route predictions, and autofill features all come from this invisible system. If it helps you and you agreed to it, what's the harm? The harm comes when consent is unclear. Most people don't read the privacy policies. They click agree to move forward. The language is dense. The choices are buried. Even if you know your data is being collected, you often don't know how much, how often, or what happens next. That's not informed consent. That's compliance. Let's take an example. A weather app asks for your location. That makes sense. It needs to know where you are to give you the forecast. But the app doesn't just check your location once. It tracks you constantly, even when the app isn't open. It sells that location data to brokers who compile it with other sources. Now your daily movements, where you sleep, shop, worship, and protest, are part of a dataset used for advertising, policing, or worse. All from checking the weather. You didn't ask for that, and you probably didn't know it was happening. But it's legal because you gave permission by accepting the terms. That's the ethical blind spot. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. And just because it makes your screen look cleaner doesn't mean the cost is small. Some companies use data to personalize with care. They collect only what they need. They protect it. They let you opt out. They delete what they don't use. Others treat data like a resource to be mined. More is better. Profiles get deeper, and the users become products. It's easy to dismiss this. I have nothing to hide. That argument sounds strong until it breaks. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about control. When someone else decides how your data is used, you lose control over your story. What you searched during a hard time, who you messaged late at night, what you liked, bookmarked, or paused on. It all builds a version of you. But that version doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the system. Now ask what happens when that system makes a mistake. Your name ends up on a list you didn't expect. You're shown job ads that don't match your skills. You're denied a loan because an algorithm flagged your online habits. You can't ask why. The rules are hidden. The machine made a decision based on your data, but won't explain how. Even when the system works as designed, it creates problems. Personalization can lock you in. You only see the things the algorithm thinks you want. It narrows your view. That's how misinformation spreads. That's how echo chambers form. You don't see what challenges you. You see what comforts you. And that's not growth. That's stagnation. So should companies stop collecting data? Not necessarily. But they should do it with limits. They should ask clearly. They should explain what's being collected, why, and for how long. They should offer real choices, not just accept all or stop using the service. They should design for privacy, not just profit. Some already do. Apple lets you block app tracking. Firefox blocks third-party cookies by default. Signal encrypts messages end-to-end. These aren't perfect solutions, but they point in the right direction, toward control, not surveillance. Users also have power. You can choose services that respect your data. You can turn off tracking. Use encrypted messaging. Avoid apps that overreach. But that takes awareness. And most people don't have time to dig through settings and policies. That's why responsibility must begin with the builders. If you're a developer, ask yourself, does this feature need personal data? Can it work without it? If you store data, do you protect it? If you share it, do users know? If the user saw every piece of data you had on them, would they be shocked? Or would they say, that makes sense, that's the test? Because data isn't just numbers, it's people. And treating people with dignity means respecting what they share, even when they don't realize they're sharing it. So yes, personalization can improve the experience, but only if the price is clear, the data is handled with care, and the user stays in control. Otherwise, what looks like convenience is just quiet exploitation, dressed in the smooth language of relevance and recommendation. And no amount of polish can cover that up for long.